Item number 10.
Item number 10, Department and Committee Reports and Non-Action Items. 10A, the 2020 Budget Hearing Number 3, Budget Reports and Critical Needs, 5-Year Forecast, and the COG presentations. Sherry Cassidy, CFO.
Good morning, Commissioners. This will be the same format as it was on Tuesday, and we have scheduled in here a hard break for lunch from noon to 12:45. We're going to change around the presentations a little bit this morning just because of scheduling. So we'll start off with Mark Louderman with Treasurer's Office, then we'll go to Dr. Kelly with Coroner's Office, and then the third one up will be Diana May with County Attorney. Then we'll go to the Sheriff. Thanks.
Mr. Treasurer.
Good morning, everybody. Good news. I'm not going to talk very long this morning, as usual, but on the Treasurer's side, budget-wise, we're good. Again, this year, we don't have any critical needs, but I thought I'd take a few minutes just to give you an update on where we're at with the Public Trustee's Office. As you know, the Big 10 counties, the governor decided that he would give up his appointments and the treasurers would become the public trustees. That was supposed to take place in July of next year, but our existing public trustee, Tom Moll, resigned. So I've been the public trustee for the last month approximately. We had a transition plan in place. We've had to ramp it up. The biggest piece of that is moving the public trustee from down in the professional building up to CSC, which requires some remodeling on our side. Luckily, that's going to start next week and should be done by the end of November. Once that's done, we'll get those folks, there's only 3 of them, we'll get them up to CSC and proceed with the transition. It's going really well. Those 3 gals that are down there have been there a long time, and they know what they're doing, thank God. So it's going really well. The cost of the remodeling is being covered by a reserve fund that appointed public trustees were required to keep once I become the public trustee as of July of next year. I'm still an appointee right now by the governor, but I will be the county treasurer, county public trustee next year. So we can use that reserve fund for the startup costs that we've got. So I'm glad to report all is going smoothly. So any questions?
Any questions for the treasurer? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Just want to say thank you for helping that go through successfully and with a smooth transition. So appreciate it.
You're welcome, but it was my staff that did it. I just kind of sat back and
then
watched.
thank you to the staff.
But yeah, thank you.
Any other questions for the treasurer? I just want to make a comment. Your presentation exceeded the assessors by twice as much. So
how much do I owe him this year?
Yeah, it's lunch, I believe.
$2, wasn't it?
Yeah, $2.
Thank you. Have a good morning.
Thank you. All right, now the coroner's office.
All right, thank you. Super pumped to be delivering the 2020 coroner's office budget to you today. So I think I have a presentation popping up here. So we'll start quickly with organizational structure. So I'm the elected coroner, chief medical examiner, and medical director of the tox lab. Under me is my deputy chief, Dr. Russell, who's here today, and then our various divisions, which I'll go through kind of briefly, just so you guys can kind of understand what's going on down there. So these are my medical examiners. There's 4 of us. We've got 4 board certified forensic pathologists who work on our office. And we've spoken previously here about the national shortage of medical examiners. There's only about 500 of us in the entire country. We need about 1,000. We only graduated 25 last year. So these are positions that are very difficult to fill, find, and then ultimately keep. But as we've also discussed, starting July 1st of this year, we will have filled that 5th medical examiner position, which is great news. These are our death investigators, and so we have 9 of them. And these are the folks that go out into the community when a death is reported to interview families, to talk to law enforcement, to talk to the physicians who care for these folks, who are also going and notifying next of kin in cases where people have died and we have to go tell their family. And so these folks do a very important job in our community that's both very sometimes physically challenging, because they also bring the human remains back to the office, but also, as you can imagine, fairly emotionally challenging. All these folks have undergraduate degrees, and about half of them now have master's degrees in forensic science. So these are very well-qualified individuals. We only have 2 administrators in our office, and Sandy on the right there has been there, started with us when she was 18 years old, and is really the institutional memory of our office. And the fact that she's survived 3 coroners is the reason why she can do what really would probably take 3 or 4 people administratively to do. So she's a huge, huge asset to us. These are our morgue techs, and these are the folks that help physically perform the autopsies. They assist the doctors in preparing the bodies for autopsy, eviscerating them, which is a fancy word to say taking the organs out, and then collecting evidence and toxicology for the doctors to figure out why these people have died. So once again, fairly physically demanding and emotionally difficult position. This is our histologist. This is the guy who takes tissue and turns it into microscopic slides, which allows the doctors to look at the tissue under the microscope and make diagnoses. And then lastly, there's our toxicologist. These are the folks that help assist us by examining blood and body fluids for drugs, alcohols, poisons, helping us figure out why folks have died. All these guys have undergraduate degrees, usually in chemistry or forensic toxicology, and 3 of the 4 have master's degrees in forensic toxicology or chemistry. And so as we move towards the roles of the coroner, our jobs are spelled out in Colorado Revised Statute 30-10-606. And it basically boils down to the coroner's job is to investigate all deaths that occur suddenly, unexpectedly, or of anything non-natural, or anything that could constitute a public health threat. So any infections or drugs that are on the streets that may put the rest of us at risk. And then lastly, to investigate deaths independently that occur in the custody of law enforcement or those incarcerated at public institutions, which gives an additional layer of transparency and independent investigation to cases that involve our law enforcement. In addition to that, we do a lot of other stuff. The main thing is really cause and manner of death, but we're also in charge of figuring out who the person is who's died, collecting evidence on or within the body. Law enforcement has a jurisdiction of any criminal act up to the body. The coroner has sole jurisdiction of the body itself. And so we're responsible for collecting all evidence on or within the body. We also provide expert testimony to our district attorney and to our defense attorneys in cases of both criminal and possibly civil proceedings. And so back in the summer, I was here to talk a little bit about most of this, and so I won't go into it in great detail. But the things that we've been focused on since January of this year has been improving our service to the community, largely through turnaround time. Turnaround time is really the key metric that most coroner's office, medical examiner's offices are judged by. Not much can happen on the legal end, on the family end, on the public health end, until the coroner releases their opinions as to why the person's died. And so we've been able to reduce our turnaround time from 32 days, which was our average last year, to 20 days this year, which is quite good, largely due to increase in our tox turnaround time, which is often the rate limiting step. We reduced it from 20 to 15.7 days. Recent surveys showed that public labs across the country, the average turnaround time was 61 days, and we're averaging 15.7, and that's the category. And these are some of the most well-respected labs in the country, and you can see how we're doing compared to them. I've spoken previously about our shift to digital transcription versus employees. So I've been able to reduce my administrative staff by one full-time person, one part-time person, and improve turnaround times along the way, allowing me to shift those salary funds to our frontline folks, hiring an additional investigator. So we're finally fully staffed with the folks that are actually out there in the community, allowing improved response times, as well as flexibility in some of our peak hours where deaths are reported. Third, we've focused on our staff mental health through secondary trauma counseling. So my violence and trauma exposed staff, my investigators and my doctors now go 4 times a year to seek to have counseling with secondary trauma trained counselors. That program's cost about $3,200 thus far, with a quarter left of the year. So it'll probably be around $5,000. And those costs were offset by a reduction in the chief medical examiner salary. Increased agency transparency. And this is the area where we've probably made the most gains this year. We really are having unprecedented engagement with our local media and our community partners. One of the first things I did in January when I took over was open the facility and our morgue to tours by local media, so they could really understand and see firsthand what we're doing, why it's important, the role that we play in this community. And since that time, we've partnered with local media, our local law enforcement, to tell stories about suicide prevention, opioid crisis, intoxication, driving deaths, homelessness, and our SIDS and unsafe sleep environment deaths. We're in schools with nonprofits nearly every single week, talking about what we do. I did a talk at the Pikes Peak Library a couple nights ago, and I'll do one in a couple more weeks. And what we've tried to do is not only leverage the data that we collect at the office, but also our platform to advocate for mental health. And that's been a topic that's been important to this board, to our public health department, and to the county in general. And so I'd like to thank you all for your commitment and your support in those efforts. The big project that we're moving towards now is to update our medical examiner laboratory system. I designed the first one in 2012, and it's really time for an update. It's a big project, and it's a lot of what I'll be doing over the next 6 months. It should allow us to give better real-time analytics and statistics about what's going on, provide better service to our out-of-county coroners, and really sort of streamline the process. Fortunately, that while a large project, which will be expensive, I can pay for it out of the unfilled medical examiner salary. So that's like the one bright spot of the fact that we have not been able to fill that position, which I won't have to come to you to ask for any additional funds for that. Which leads us directly to our understaffed medical examiner, which, as I said, will be filled in July of this year. And then lastly, we are going to increase, I'm going to increase the cost or the fee for our out-of-county autopsies this year by $50. We haven't raised fees in about 3 or 4 years. And we are doing, we've got more staff than we've had before. We've expanded our toxicology that we do. Now we can quantify how much THC and the metabolites that are in there, so that costs money. And now we do our neuropathology consultation in-house because one of our doctors is a neuropathologist. We used to send that out and then pass that cost on directly to the out-of-county coroners. Now we're doing that in-house, and we're not charging them additional funds. And so all of that, I think, is rationale for increasing that cost $50 to $1,500 per autopsy. Over the course of the year, that's probably going to be about a $15,000 increase in revenue. Not a huge amount, but it's enough to offset the additional part-time morgue staff that we've hired to help during our peak hours. And so we moved to some budgetary highlights. As with most departments, our major cost is salary. Our total budget's $2.852 million. That's last year, as will be the same this year as the proposal sits, and as we have no critical needs. So no changes there. When we talk about our revenues, as you all know, we not only do autopsies for El Paso County, but we do it for much of southern Colorado. And so the counties highlighted in color with their names are all the counties that we do autopsies for. And you can see the breakout there at the bottom. The little X to the right above Cuyahoga County, that's Cheyenne, and that's a new county I added starting this summer. So now we're up to, I think, to 21. The stars are counties that we don't do the autopsies for, but we do the toxicology for. We're the only coroner's office in the state with our own toxicology lab. And so that's Pueblo to our south, then Los Animas, and then Arapahoe north of Elbert County. And so all those places send us their toxicology. And when we look at revenues and the increases since last year, that's largely due to those toxicology. We're a little ahead on autopsies this year from out of counties, but the biggest amount of the increase in revenue is going to be from those toxicology services. The triangle there is Denver, and we also do some laboratory services for them that they aren't able to do themselves. So revenues.
Just a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Just morbid curiosity, I suppose. What percentage of deaths in El Paso County require an autopsy?
Yeah, so we have about 5,000 deaths a year, 4,500 to 5,000. We're going to take calls on about 80% of those. But about 60% of the total we're going to release because we know why that person's deceased. There's no concerns for foul play. There's no suspicions of drugs or injury. And so they've just died at home. We called their doctor. Their doctor is not surprised to be getting this phone call. So only about 20% of the total deaths that occur are going to end up at our office. Of that, probably 80% of those are going to require an autopsy. The other 20% are going to require what we call an external exam, which is you just look at the outside of the body, ruling out suspicions of neglect or abuse. They've got documented either injuries or disease that can account for their death. And so of the, let's say, 4,500 people that die, about 850 to 900 of those are going to come into the office and require an examination by us. So year to date, first week of October, we've brought in nearly $470,000. Last year to date, this year it's $564,000, which means our estimate for this year conservatively will bring in about $650,000 compared to $571,000 last year. So that's a 12% increase over 2018 and an 18% increase in the last 2 years. Once again, largely due to increased tox revenue. And so when we look at our regional comparisons, really Denver and Arapahoe are the only two other counties in Colorado that are really even on the, even playing the same sport with us at this point. And so you can see where our numbers compare. So the first line is complete autopsies, full autopsies that include an internal exam. We're doing significantly more than both of those offices. The external exams are, once again, just looking at the outside of the body. For accreditation purposes, 4 external exams count as 1 autopsy because the additional investment in time and resources. And so when you look at the 4th line down there, adjusted total autopsies, that's really how you compare apples to apples across the board because you can see Denver does a lot more external exams. And when you look there, we're doing 170 more than Denver. And so when I talk about us being the largest medical examiner's office in the state, this is what I'm talking about. Our budget is $2.85 million compared to Denver's $3.3. But what you have to take into account is that we're not just serving El Paso County. We're serving nearly all of southern Colorado. And so when you take the $650,000 of revenue that we bring in that goes back to the general countywide fund to either fund other services or is refunded due to Tabor, it makes us essentially a functional budget of $2.2 million. And so we're doing 170 more autopsies than Denver, and we're doing it for more than $1 million less. The best way to compare medical examiners' offices across the country is through per capita costs. The recommendation is that to fund a competent medical examiner coroner is $3.75 per person at minimum. And right now, if you take that $2.8 million, we're right at about $3.9 or $3.90, which is right in the realm where we should be. If you look at it with the revenue brought in, it's about $3. So the citizens of El Paso County are getting $4 service for $3, which I think we can all agree is how government should work. We should provide service above and beyond what is expected, not below that. And so an independent kind of review of our office through our inspection, I think highlights what the work that we're doing here. Our inspector in our last accreditation believed that our office was a stellar example of a highly professional and functional medical legal death investigation. She felt that we go above and beyond in our involvement in the community, beyond just what our statutory obligations are, and that the county should really take pride in its leadership and its staff. And we've talked previously at this meeting, and I've talked with my other countywide elected officials about how, salary isn't the only thing that drives job satisfaction, and that shared mission and values and really a commitment to what we're doing is really what makes, really what enables an agency and government to really deliver the best service to its community. And that's something that we've tried to do. So I just want to highlight the level of self-humiliation that I'm willing to go to make sure that our folks are invested and know we're here to take the best care of that we can of this community. So I would love to answer any questions or take any comments from you all.
Well, I was just going to say, it's a good thing that your staff is accomplished in handling bodies. That way
That's right.
you weren't at risk when they were holding you there. So, any questions for the coroner? Commissioner Bremer.
Excellent job. I have a feeling that's about to be seconded up here as well. But I just wanted to find out, obviously there are some economies of scale in your office, and that's part of the reason we provide these out-of-county services to those other jurisdictions. But does that $1,500 fee for the autopsy actually cover your costs for the most part?
Yeah, so we did early this year, when I took over, that was the question that I asked. Are we actually making money here? Or are we costing El Paso County taxpayers? So we had not done a cost analysis, I think, in over a decade or more. And so we did that. It's a hard thing to do because the supplies you can figure out, but the staffing is difficult because most of those people are full-time employees. They're going to be there anyways, whether they do 2 autopsies that day or 4 autopsies that day, we're going to pay them the same amount. So the best estimate we could come up with was about a cost of about $1,160 per out-of-county autopsy. There's some time differences between what we have to invest on an in-county case because we have to go to the home, investigate, talk to the family, and that can take several hours. The out-of-counties, we basically take a phone call, write it down, and then they bring us the remains and we do the autopsy. And so the out-of-counties, we're charging essentially $1,500. Our best estimate at cost is $1,160. The other way to do it is to look at if I said, you know what, we're not doing any more. We're not taking any more out-of-county cases. How much could I save staffing-wise? There's going to be a little bit in supplies, but most of it's going to be staffing. I could probably get by, numbers-wise, reducing my part-time forensic pathologist, which is $130,000 a year, and maybe a part-time diener, which is another $20,000, and then maybe reduce staff by a toxicologist. So we're saying all in, I could probably save realistically $200,000, but it's going to cost us $650,000. And so anybody can do that math and realize that's not a good equation for the county. So it definitely is worth it. Financially, it also is important because it's a service that's critical. Teller County also is under RDA. And so it's morally and ethically to allow these communities to have access to facilities and doctors that they wouldn't otherwise have, also, to me, carries with it significant weight.
Thank you.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. So I appreciate the presentation today and the information that you provide. Of course, we've talked about some of the things that I think are really going on well within your office, and that's a credit to you and the team. I'm pleased to see that you have a trauma counseling program, right, for your own staff. That sounds great. It's interesting to see the time reduction that you've done with regard to conducting autopsies. That is what we should always be looking for, right, as public agencies, to do the best we can to deliver the most effectivity for the taxpayer dollars that we're provided. And then one last point, I know you've done a lot of work working with the community, you and the team, with regard to things like suicide reductions. And it's not only just providing the statistics so that local public agencies and local nonprofits can make effective decisions about how to address that issue, but actually being actively engaged in that. So I appreciate all of that work that you're doing, and thank you for the presentation today. Thanks to the team.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bremer.
Sorry, I get a redo too. You mentioned mental health and the work you guys are doing in the community on that. I wanted to let you know that you've really, I feel like your office and perhaps you personally before you were even in office really helped push that along as a community conversation. And as a Board of Health member with your predecessor, Dr. Bucks, is still on the Board of Health as well. I just wanted to commend you for working closely with our public health officials, with our communications staff, with everybody for really just helping the community realize that it's a pervasive issue, and we're doing everything we can with all of the governmental bodies that we can. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for the coroner? Yes, Madam County Attorney.
Oh, this
I
is
just
not
wanted
good.
to add a little shout out also on his community engagement. He even spent a Sunday morning with about 22 of my son's Bible study girls and boys, young teenagers, and talked to them about pathology and things not to do so they stay out of the coroner's office. And also, I think from that, got interest in about 3 of the kiddos that they really want to go become forensic pathologists. So
See?
that just says, I think it just gives a lot of kudos to who our elected coroner is and the time and the commitment he has to the community and our future.
Thank you. Solve that workforce shortage myself.
Stay after it.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Mr. Sheriff. Oh. Attorney? They're not in that order on my list.
I think someone might have stolen my little cheat sheets up here. Does anyone have any extra paperwork with them? Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Diana May, County Attorney. We are going a little bit out of order because we thought we would be a little bit of ahead on schedules. So I first want to start with that we call ourselves CAT, C-A-T. So you're going to see that referred to throughout the presentation. Generally dog lovers, some of us are cat lovers, but mostly dog lovers. For Chair Waller's purposes, there are some cat lovers in our group still, but we call ourselves CAT. So you're going to see that throughout our presentation.
More of us are allergic to cats, so yes, when the county attorney comes, we do tend to bristle a little, so.
I agree. So we have 2 separate divisions. The division that you're most familiar with seeing is our civil division. And obviously there's myself, who oversees both the civil and the human service division. But in the civil division, we have, in addition to myself, we have 7 attorneys and then 5 staff members, which has been pretty consistent throughout the years. You'll hear that we have added 1 additional staff member that works in the sheriff's office in the past 10 years. But what we do is we represent you all. We answer legal questions for all different departments, elected officials. We represent other elected officials when there's not a conflict. And then in addition to, we provide general legal support to all the different departments. In our Human Service Division, which is the department that you often don't see a lot, but is an extremely busy, valuable section of our department, is our Human Service. That is overseen by our Chief Deputy, who is Laura Rago, who is here, who's been with the county over 20 years. And runs this very important aspect of our office. Within her office, she's included in the 12 attorneys, and then there's 17 staff members. And what they do is they represent the Department of Human Services in court, and they provide legal advice to the Department of Human Services. And I'll talk a little bit more about all the different areas that they cover in fulfilling those obligations. We also like to have fun. In addition to being busy, you'll see that there's 2 different pictures for our civil division because we've had the most significant turnover in our civil division, I think, in the history, in May when Ms. Folsom was appointed as the county administrator, and then she stole from us Kenny Hodges as the deputy administrator. So I want to make sure I'm giving credit to the full team, because you've had this full team with you throughout the year, just up to the first 5 months. And we like to have fun. Although we're very busy, we still like to have a little fun, as you can see from some of our pictures. So what are we doing in the civil division? Our first obligation is to represent the county and to represent the Board of County Commissioners. In doing that, we also represent the administration departments that are underneath the Board of County Commissioners and the appointed advisory boards. When there's not a conflict of interest, we also represent other elected officials, and there rarely is a conflict. We also represent the county in all lawsuits brought against the county in the public liability or tort world as a result of us being self-insured. We also represent the departments in a variety of other civil matters and civil hearings. Our mandate is the Constitution. The Constitution talks about appointment of a county attorney and then allows for you to proceed with the appointment, which you have done. Our Human Service Division also works extremely hard and likes to have some fun too. They even have a softball team, which is quite impressive. We won't talk about necessarily their record, but they like to have fun, and it's a great group of 12 attorneys and 7 staff that's over there. Their operations that they cover is to represent the Department of Human Service, but that's very broad. They provide legal advice to the Department of Human Service. They represent traditionally what you think, which is the dependency and neglect, which is representing the department in those type of matters where a child could be dependent and neglect. But we also are representing the department in juvenile delinquency matters. So the department has a say when the criminal courts are dealing with placement of juveniles. We also have several specialty courts that we represent the department in. We also provide significant amount of on-call status to the department and also provide training. Their statutes are mandated under 3 basic provisions: Title 19, which is the Children's Code, the Probate Code, and the Mental Health Code for the specialty courts. Instead of going through each one of the 5 strategic plan goals that the county has, I want to tell you that we're representing various different departments and offices in meeting each one of their goals. We're assisting with legal advice, legal support, and legal representation in assisting them to reach their goals. I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about the civil litigation at this point. With regard to civil litigation, this is one of the areas that you probably see us I would say, where it's more visible, I guess, to you and also the public. And I can tell you that, as we indicated last year in the presentation, we are continuing the trend that we saw last year on the increase of civil litigation. And as you can see, by the end of the year, we're probably going to, by 50%, increase the amount of civil cases we had from last year. A lot of those are pro se individuals that are getting much more savvy on filing lawsuits, which you would think maybe would be a little bit easier, but it's actually almost a little more complicated because you kind of have to weed out what they're trying to sue you on in those matters. But as you see, we have 45 new cases to date in 2019, and I think it may even be 46 because I think we had a new lawsuit that came in last week, which is up significantly from the previous years. One additional piece of information I wanted to provide to you: since 2015, we have been able to resolve with some type of closure of dismissal or agreements or winning motions to dismiss, which we're very successful on, winning summary judgment motions, winning appellate arguments, winning trials. 124 of those 152 lawsuits. That's huge, with us having to reach agreements in 11 of those cases. That's something you should be very proud of, and I can't take credit for it, but we can take credit for it. Amy and I and the staff, we have an amazing civil litigation staff that works very hard, and all of our civil attorneys touch civil litigation. Even if it's Cole, who sometimes says he refuses to go to court, he still has civil litigation that he's handling. We also spend a significant amount of our time on helping the PIO office and the elected and the departments on legal reviews of Colorado open records requests. And we are assisting with the transition with the PIO unit with their new CORA officer. Notice of claims is also indicative of the increase of litigation, because most cases need to receive a notice of claim, which is basically, we're going to be suing you, prior to litigation in most cases. As you can see, our notice of claims have increased in 2019 also. Continuing with civil litigation, I also just want to let you know that what settlements we've reached this year. This year, we've only paid out $15,000 to date in 3 different matters. One of them was a continuation, which was the Steele litigation regarding PR bonds from last year. 2018 was a little bit of a rough year with one significant payout through a matter, but consistently around 100 and 120 is generally average. This year, is going to come in extremely low, and I think you can thank the civil litigation team for that, for being very aggressive with their motion filings, being very aggressive with our stance in defending our clients. A couple highlights from the Civil Litigation Division is we've also been successful on consolidating some of these pro se cases. The pro se individuals are filing multiple lawsuits against multiple people, and we're able to save some time on resources by getting a successful consolidation of 2 different defendants who had filed 13 cases over a very short period of time. We also have been asking in those cases for attorney's fees, and we've been getting awards on attorney's fees. We also, and this I want to give a shout out to Kenny on this, that we had a matter called Brumley that Kenny and I started in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, that finally was put to bed this last year. We had very successful arguments that Kenny had made in the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and then the plaintiff's attorney appealed to the United States Supreme Court, and the certiorari was denied. And so that was a very successful win. That was defending the Department of Human Services. The still litigation was the litigation concerning PR bonds, and we've only had $1,000 in claims this year, and that matter has since been closed. Most significantly, what I can tell you is your civil litigation team is saving you a lot of money, because if we weren't able to do these cases, we would be having to pay outside counsel costs at a much higher rate than you're paying our salaries on. And so there's a significant amount of savings, and there's a lot to be said for the clients to know who their attorneys are and to be represented and to be able to walk into the office and say, hey, what's going on? So there's a huge benefit in that. Moving on to additional areas in our civil division, risk management, which is Andrea's group, we work hand in hand with her. We work very proactively in managing risk exposures, and you can see from my bullet points some of the highlights that we do in working with her. We also have an attorney signed to work directly with her on case triage from the beginning, so maybe we can see if we need to change something, if we need to do additional training, if we need to have different conversations with different departments, and we work very closely even on some of the low-level claims. And so that's a very positive relationship that again helps save the county money and provide good sound legal advice early on. We also have our employment division. It would be lovely if we had one person working full-time on employment, but we don't have that luxury. So we have right now Lisa Kirkman that works employment, then also assists with civil DHS matters. Employment's busy, and I believe you're going to hear that from Ms. McGee later this afternoon. In addition to providing daily, and I mean daily, including on weekends, legal advice on any type of employment matter that comes up, we're also updating the employee manual in conjunction with her department. We have an in-house individual who does Title VII investigations. As you can see, there's been an increase since last year. It takes a significant amount of time, but by doing that, we're saving a significant amount of money because those investigations from the outside can be very expensive. In addition, we have defended the county in our first USERRA complaint that was made successfully. In addition, we provide training to all different departments, and we're in the process of ongoing assistance on the county's evaluation of ADA compliance and ADA issues from both a employee standpoint and also a facility standpoint. In employment, we're also providing a service beyond just legal advice by doing a significant amount of trainings. As you can see, we're around 45 hours that we're able to do in-house, and that doesn't even include just answering questions on training issues. We've expanded this year to include training on ADA and FEMLA, reasonable suspicion, and First Amendment, and we are going to be continuing those. And what's important is we've tried to tailor these. Instead of hiring someone from outside to generally come in and talk about topics, we're able to tailor these trainings to the specific needs of the department and the elected official and the issues that we may be seeing throughout the county, which we have gotten feedback from is extremely helpful. Our civil division land use. just like I told you that our civil litigation and our employment's up, our land use is significantly up. And as you know, we have Cole and Lori who are the main two individuals in our land use, but we also have Steve that's a significant help, and then also one of our new attorneys, Mary. On that note, our newest two attorneys, Brian and Mary, have been wonderful on filling the needs and the gaps and meshing well in our department. In this year, it's the 7th year that we've been providing in-house support to the land use division with an attorney, Lori, at the RDC building. At least half of her time, and it's very helpful. We provide representation on the Planning Commission and Board of Adjustments. We've had litigation in the land use matter. We've been very successful on our defense of the Friends of the Black Forest litigation that was dismissed earlier this year. And we do have ongoing litigation in these areas that has been keeping Cole, Lori, and Steve very busy. Code enforcement has been transitioned from Steve over to Mary, and I can tell you this is one of our challenges that we have. As you heard yesterday from Craig, they are very busy in code enforcement, and although our numbers of filings are not significantly up this year, we have a number of cases that's waiting attorney litigation and filing. And it's a pretty high number, but it's a matter of staffing in the sense of it takes a significant amount of time of staff to review and file in the attorneys, and we have to do it in waves because we can't file 50 cases all at one time and have the resources to go over to court and do that. I can tell you that it's something that's important that I'm hoping to report next year we will have a significant improvement on, and we've been working very well with Craig on problem solving this. But as you can see, they were able to add an additional staff member in 2016, and there's been additional complaints that have come in, and it's caused a significant increase in these type of cases that have needed the county attorney's office attention. We've had also an increase in land use applications, subdivision, and water reviews, and this is, I think, consistent with what we all know, that our economy is doing really well. And each of those do require a legal review. And as you can see from some of the numbers, and that includes from the Planning Commission to the Board of Adjustments to subdivision reviews. We've also had some very large and contentious land use applications. There's been over 5 fairly contentious land use matters that the county attorney's office has been involved in with Cole and Lori. We also have a 1041 application pending with Meadow Lake that is taking a significant amount of time, and then assisting with the land development code amendments with Craig's unit also. Continuing along that area, our public works and real estate area have been extremely busy with us working with public works on review of right-of-ways and road projects. In real estate, we had really great success this year with our URA being established and working through some of our first year URAs. Amy did a very good job at being very proactive early on from the legal department, and Steve did a fantastic job on continuing and representing the county well. We also finally were able to resolve the Penrose Equestrian Center that Cole had worked really hard on. And we're in the process of doing various other different real estate reviews, specifically on the Union Boulevard. And these are not easy projects. All of the land use matters take a significant amount of time and take a significant amount of review. I do want to just highlight one thing before I move on. You will also, and I think you also heard from Craig on this, that with new legislation, the water reviews are going to have to take place much earlier on in the process, which is going to cause a front load of work from the county attorney's office also. So our civil division, we have fun, but we work really hard for you, and our numbers are continuing to increase, our obligations are continuing to increase, but we're still meeting the need of the clients, and we're doing it well, I can assure you. Our human service division, equally, what I want to tell you is, although you may not see them, they are incredible. This is a group of 12 attorneys, and this is a group of of staff with 15 staff that just work amazing for you. They do it with a smile, and they do a really tough subject matter. They're dealing with the same subject matters that DHS is dealing with. They're the busiest county attorney's office in the DHS unit in the state of Colorado. And as I can assure you, and I don't need to go through these same numbers, but just as Julie told you, what the numbers are for the Department of Human Services have a direct impact on the county attorney's office DHS side, because we're having to then pick up the torch from when those matters are brought into court. We're having to work with the new systems that the states have implemented, and be very proactive and try to problem solve on how to manage the various different numbers. I can tell you that our caseload for attorneys are the highest number of cases that a county attorney on the DHS side is handling statewide. They are very busy. They have 880 open cases, and it's slightly down from last year, but one thing I want to let you know is there's been a significant change in the way DNN cases are handled. And it's had a very big impact on the department. And what has happened is the state is now paying respondent counsel, so the individuals who represent the parents, by the hour now. As of this last year, they paid them per case. So the attorneys, respondent counsel, are taking matters to hearing more, and things have become very much more litigious. We're seeing a huge increase of number of hearings, the time of the hearings. Ms. Raga was in court till 9 o'clock last night, 8:50 last night, and I think we had an attorney in court till after 7 already this week. What has happened and what the courts have said is the hearings are lasting longer, there's more hearings, and that's obviously causing more work on our DHS side. Along those same lines, the courthouse has decided to increase the magistrate handling dependency and neglects by one individual also. Fortunately, the funding for the human service side of the county attorney's office is done through the department, through reimbursement through state and federal funds, and they are able to increase the number of attorney through the department for that new division. And that's not something you have in your budget because it comes through state and federal funding. I just want to make that clear. But I can just tell you, as you see with these numbers, they are busy. They handle not just these dependency and neglect cases, but they're handling juvenile delinquencies, probate, specialty courts. Appeals are up too, for the same reason I had told you before. Respondent counsels now are getting paid hourly to do these cases versus per case. They're also very successful, and success meaning reaching the right results in these very important cases. They've had jury trials, they've been appearing in specialty courts, they provide 24 access to attorneys are available for the department 365 days a year, and we continue while we're doing our great job in court representing the best interests of the children. We're also providing training to the department and on-call legal service. This department works hard, and I just want to really shout out so you know how hard that unit works, because you may not see them every day because they're not physically located in this building, but the staff works amazingly hard, and so do the attorneys, and they work very well together. They also have seen a huge increase in discovery, which has caused a significant strain on our staffing also. As you can see with the numbers, it's significant. Our budget, as I indicated to you, you are considering the budget for the civil unit. The Department of Human Service section unit is dealt with through the state and the federal. Our budget has stayed fairly consistent, but I am making one request this year, and my critical need for this year is I need more staff. I need staff to be able to support the attorneys. I need a staff member to be able to support the client, and I need a staff member to help even the load. I know that you also will be considering a 1.5 increase to each department's budget, and that 1.5% 1% is huge because it's an ability for you all to tell the departments, my department, the other departments, that we appreciate you. We know that you've worked hard, and we're increasing the budget by that amount. Because they work hard, we've not been able to significantly reduce caseloads, but it's something that's very much appreciated and the staff would welcome. In addition to that, the need for another paralegal in the civil division is critical. As you can see, since the 1990s, we've only increased our staff on the civil side by 2, and one of them was directly housed at the sheriff's office, and he is paying for that position. The reason or the justification, I believe that I've laid out, is our increase not only in our litigation and our employment matters, but our huge increase in meeting the needs of the clients on our land use issues. Right now, I have a manager, office manager, Edie Anderson, who's extraordinary, but she can't spend her time managing to the extent that we need her, in the sense that she's having to file code enforcement cases. She's having to help out on civil litigation cases. And we've had to spread her very thin because she's having to help cover for the work that the staff's doing. The paralegals in our unit are incredible. They work really hard, and they've had a really hard year this year on the second year of increase of work, and they deserve to have another staff to assist them, and so do the attorneys. I also just want to end with, again, that we like to have fun. We also have a poet in our mix, which is Lori. And she, I think, was a runner-up on Amy's contest on the limericks. And I think this is just something I want to end with, that the county attorney's the best. The others put us to the test, but we haven't failed. They've never been gelled, and we clean up every mess. So on that note, is there any questions for your county attorney?
Any questions for the county attorney? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you. Appreciate the briefing. Great work as always. For the critical need, the one full-time employee, is that embedded in the budget numbers that we have at this time?
Yes, it is, Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Sheriff, are you going to take your full 45 minutes? I'm trying to determine whether we need to take a quick comfort break or not. Actually, let's just do this. Let's
yeah, you probably
3 minute.
Mine will go probably an hour and a half.
Anything over 45 minutes, we're cutting budget. No, we're just going to stand in
It's not going to go. No, we'll take a break. Let's take 5 if that's what you want to do, and
please.
We're good.
We'll just stand in a brief recess, very brief recess for a comfort break. All right, the meeting will come back to order.
Scared me there with a hammer.
We're on to the sheriff's presentation.
Good morning, commissioners. I got a number of my staff with me this morning. I've got the undersheriff. Let me see if I can figure this out. I'd turn around, but I can't use the mic. I've got the undersheriff. I've got my bureau chief from detentions here. I've got Commander Cy Gillespie from the jail, detention or patrol division commander. John David here, sorry. I got Larry Borland, the administrator, Commander Andy Prem. I got my chief of staff, my executive assistant. I've got Jane Fromey here from our admin section from budget and finance, and Andy James, our commander from investigations. So feel free to ask them questions. We're going to blaze through this, I hope. First thing I want to do is I want to thank the commissioners. I want to thank the administrator, Nikki and Sherry, for putting together such hard work and making this budget presentation easy. I want to thank you guys again for the addition of the 1.5% salary increase. That is huge as we're trying to make some adjustments that we'll talk about in a little bit. We're going to present a budget again for the 5th year in a row that has no capital items and no increases that we're requesting, no additional FTEs. We're thankful for the great work again that we've had. You know, and I want to take a second and talk a little bit about the work that Mr. Wolken has done on pretrial release. You know, we last year when we presented the budget, we were talking about having record numbers in the jail. Over 1,700 was our average daily population, and we have been focusing on that this year. And we want to attribute a large percentage of the lowered average daily population to the pretrial release program. And I want to thank you again for pushing a couple of extra people in there. We may be seeing a new trend as we move forward. Because we've seen some fairly significant drops in our average daily population. We're sitting anywhere now between 1,550 and 1,600 is what our ADP has been since the first of the year. We're attributing a bunch of that to this pretrial release work, along with a lot of other things that we're doing in the facility. And so by adding a couple of more people to his program, I think that we're probably going to move ahead with some lower numbers next year, and all in all, that improves safety inside the facility. So I want to talk real briefly about some of the budget saving opportunities that we are looking at in 2020. We're going to move our civil unit out of the Metro Jail building over to the Office of the Sheriff. That'll save us about $20,000 annually moving forward. We're going to make space over there by remodeling our sheriff's training facility using SCAP funds, and we're going to move our training section out of the OTS down to the training facility down at CJC. That's where we had that one meeting down there. I think it was in May. Is that about right? It was May, I think. We had a meeting down at our training facility. So we're going to use SCAP funds for that. We're going to continue to leverage marijuana enforcement budget using state black and gray market grant funds. We're implementing a new e-citation module that will implement us the ability to scan driver's licenses and print summonses out as part of our records management system, and it will also integrate into our new jail management system, and that will significantly save time for all of our arrestees, but it will also save time for all the other agencies, CSPD, Manitou, Fountain, Monument, as they make arrests. That'll help save time there as well. It'll also dump demographic and vehicle data captured directly into electronic fields, both in the records management and the jail management systems, and it gets us extremely close to having a single point of data capture on most of our major service areas that we capture data. Next, we're moving to an ACADIS software system that we've purchased, resulting in increased accuracy and more efficient tracking of our training records and compliance operations. We're going to implement First Watch software, which will help us better track calls for service and other service data. And we're doing all of these software changes through some of the savings that we've put together through our public safety tax. We have switched to a quartermaster system for uniform issue and maintenance that'll save us up to $100,000 a year moving forward. We think that we will get better use of our uniforms and be able to track them better rather than giving uniform allowances, and so we're excited about that. We're going to purchase, this has been an ongoing issue with our medical contract in the jail. A lot of times we end up, because they are unable to treat them in the jail or unable to properly diagnose issues in the jail, we end up transporting inmates to local hospitals. We're going to purchase some telemedicine equipment and work with UC Health. That'll allow us to do these things over the phone and over telemedicine lines. And that'll greatly reduce the transports. We think probably 70% reduction in transports for inmates, and that'll save not only staff time, officer time, but it'll save us healthcare costs, and it'll make it extremely, or a lot less risky in transporting people to the hospital and leaving them in the hospital. From our inmate commissary fund, we're going to replace all of the current television systems using a cloud-based tablet. That'll include television, commissary, and some other features, so that's a zero cost to our budget.
So if I could, what's the status of the medical contract for the jail? Where do you think that's going to end up?
Yeah, it's hard to tell at this point. It's out for bid. We have an RFP in the field that is due to close on November 4th, and we'll open the bids on November 4th and get a good look at whoever's out there at that point.
But certainly not not looking at being able to save money there. The cost of that contract obviously is going to go up. Is that what we're thinking?
It could. I'm trying to look at this as we're trying to do something that may have a much better impact on our community by using a community-based medical and mental health service. I mean, there's always a chance it could come in lower. That doesn't seem to be the case nationally anyway, and it hasn't been the case locally in the last couple of contracts that we've done. The issues that we've got is just healthcare costs across the country have skyrocketed, and that's part of healthcare costs. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to do it better, and that better doesn't always necessarily mean cheaper. And so, we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to do the most cost-effective way possible. We may not recognize that in savings on our budgeted mental health or medical contract. We may end up seeing it by providing a better product that overall to our community provides a better medical system that keeps people from cycling back into the jail because of mental health issues and stuff. So we'll have to cross that bridge after November 4th, probably sometime around the end of the next week when we get that thing finalized out and have some discussions about the costs. Does that help?
Thank you.
Some of the other opportunities that we're taking advantage of our public safety tax fund balance is this last few months or next year, we're going to complete phase 2 of our radio replacement program. And we've ended up, because of some issues we had with our Tate radio system, we've had to replace all of our mobile radios and handheld radios in law enforcement. The Tate radios weren't functioning with some of the changes to the Pikes Peak radio network, and so we've had to replace all of those. That was an expensive move. But because we completed the payment on upgrading the Pikes Peak radio network, that affects every county budget, by the way. Everybody that uses radios locally is on that PPRCN, and we just finished an $8 million upgrade that we covered for all county agencies. The next thing is we are improving our vehicle replacement program for emergency response vehicles. We're switching to some different platforms, mainly because the Chevy Impala is no longer available. The Chevy Caprice, which is their next line, is rear-wheel drive, which is not effective for use in Colorado. And so we're switching to an all-wheel drive Dodge Charger and replacing a bunch of those. This is their office. This is where, cops spend 10 hours a day, and we've got to provide a product that is dependable and safe and comfortable for them. And so we're jumping up our vehicle replacement program. We just purchased a state-of-the-art Type 6 fire engine for our wildland fire crew. We rolled that out last week. We have 3 Type 6s now and a Type 3, and so whenever we get a wildland fire, we have the ability to respond effectively and efficiently, and this new state-of-the-art fire truck is really pretty cool. If you haven't seen it, it's up at our emergency services division all the time. They'd love to show it off for you and show you what it can do. It's pretty effective piece of equipment. We implemented an ongoing TASER replacement program that includes all deputies. So we have 534 sworn deputies. Everybody will be issued a TASER, a new TASER 7. We're one of the largest agencies in the country to get these brand new TASERs. I believe we are the only one in Colorado to get the brand new ones, and so we're excited about that. It'll be deployable in detentions as well as in law enforcement. We implemented a bullet-resistant or stab-resistant vest replacement program for all deputies. In the jail, they get to select either bullet-resistant or stab-resistant on patrol. It is all bullet-resistant. And in addition to that, we have partnered with Shield 616. Last night there was another presentation of 10 vests, and so now everyone in law enforcement at the sheriff's office is now issued a Shield 616 vest, which is rifle rated. Now they're using Angel armor, which is about 1/3 of the weight for these ballistic panels, and so we're excited to have that. we're now getting ready to issue personal protective equipment such as gas masks for all law enforcement deputies, equipment we've never had before. There's the Shield 616 piece. The telemedicine equipment, we talked about that earlier, and then the commissary fund. So here's some of the budget challenges that we're working with moving forward. Attracting and training, retaining quality personnel by keeping up with police salary and benefits. You know, we've had this discussion a number of times. Again, that's why it is so critical that this 1.5 points that you've added, along with some of the moves that we're going to make, we are reducing some staff numbers so that we can make some more aggressive changes to our budget. We are really concerned that across the Front Range where we sit in those comparison numbers, and it has a dramatic effect on how we are able to recruit and retain employees. I included in the handout that you got a police executive research forum that talks about the workforce crisis and what police agencies are doing about it. This is the executive summary. Really interesting report. I encourage you to read it. It shows that agencies nationwide are experiencing these issues and what they're doing about it. We've taken a number of these steps as well. Some of the things that we're going to do salary-wise will take into account a few others. For instance, you'll see a lot of deputy sheriffs with facial hair. As controversial as that was in the beginning, that is a recruiting piece at this point. And this perf report talks about that. It talks about the ability for them to be able to wear exposed tattoos. Being able to reach the highest level of a deputy sheriff sooner. We're going to make some moves to adjust that. And so we're excited about some of the changes, but these budget challenges will continue, and so we'll talk about what we're going to do there. We are working diligently, like I said earlier, on containing jail population growth, mainly because the facility is landlocked, as you've seen. We are completely surrounded by water on the west, by a railroad track on the south, by a privately owned parcel of land on the east, and by the city's impound lot on the north. And so we are very, very limited on where we can expand the jail, and so we're concerned about what happens there. But in addition to that, the facility and the infrastructure of the facility is just aging. The equipment that services the building is aging, and much like with roads, when you've got potholes, we can patch the problems temporarily, but we're going to get to a point here within the next few years where we're going to have to start having discussions about how to keep the building from becoming functionally obsolete. And we are having safety and security issues with door locks. Inmates are able to defeat door locks on a routine basis, and so we're looking at processes on how to shore that up. None of these are inexpensive items, and what happens is it creates an unsafe working condition. The other day we had an inmate that was not following the rules. Kicked the door open, kicked the door unlocked, and charged at the deputy outside the cell. And so those are the kind of things that we're seeing more and more often, and so we're going to have some discussions on how to deal with that. Again, to touch on what we were talking about earlier about the unknown increases in jail medical and mental health services contract, that will be continued budget challenge. We're anticipating a $70,000 increase next year in our food services contract. We're making some adjustments to work through that. Our local homeless and mental health issues continue to impact both not only law enforcement dealing with them in the field, but also dealing with them as we incarcerate them. The other day, we had an inmate brought in that was completely infested with fleas. We've had scabies, we've had Hep A in the facility. Just this year, we ended up working with the health department to inoculate every single person that works in the jail against Hep A. We are one of the only facilities in the state to do that, but by doing that, we contained what could have been a major outbreak. And knock on wood, we've got control of that. Every so often, we get another inmate show up that's got Hep A. which continues our time for how long we have to monitor and what have you, but we're getting there. We will continue to fight marijuana and opioid and other drug enforcement. Commissioner Vanderwerf and I had a conversation yesterday about some of the changes in state law that we are really concerned with, that is going to increase our average daily population. We'll continue to actively engage in developing and shaping public safety legislation that benefits our region. That's something that I have committed to at the state level. I think that we've seen enough shenanigans going on at the state level that if we don't stay actively engaged, we get what we get. And so right now we're on the front edge of seeing what legislation is going to come about, and we're able to actually implement a lot of changes. There were a couple last year that we ran off, that we kept them from implementing. There were a couple that we steered in a direction that didn't damage us quite so bad. And then there were still a couple that, regardless of how much effort we put against it, they still passed. And so we're still working on that. One of those being the red flag bill, and the other one being the issue with changing the possession of 4 grams or less of any drug to being a misdemeanor. We will work collaboratively with a jail advisory group that we're putting together to complete and present to the commission sometime by mid-2020 a very comprehensive report on issues such as remaining competitive with salaries statewide, and what we think we need to do to get there. Maintain and replace the aging facilities and equipment that I just talked about a little bit ago. Maintaining adequate staffing in detentions, law enforcement, security, and support. It's critical as we're growing on and on and on that we find a way to maintain the appropriate staffing for an ever-increasing jail population and an ever-increasing response area. You know, as the community continues to grow, we still need to respond, and by every year holding the line on the budget and not coming in and asking for additional FTEs, at some point we're going to have to stop that and figure out a way to move forward. And that's all I've got. Any questions, concerns, comments?
Any questions from the board? Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of comments, actually. Well, I wanted to thank you and the staff for all the great work you guys have done. Just kind of some comments. A lot of the public doesn't realize that the, fire, falls under the sheriff as fire warden, fire chief, and so a lot of people don't realize that happens, and that's why. And you did highlight the new equipment in there, so that was very good for the public to understand that, on any given year, the sheriff's department could be doing a lot of fires like you did last year.
Right.
Luckily this year, much smaller response requirements, which was, a blessing, and we pray that continues. I still have some ongoing concerns with the state, unfunded mandates or other issues that may come, as we saw this year, that could continue. So I'm worried about that in the future. As I think most people know, public safety is one of the most important things, and usually listed at number 1 of what the government should be doing and funding. And it's one of the priorities, of course, for me, and I think for all the commissioners up here. I did want to highlight, although it's separate from the sheriff's budget, that some additional dollars were going into infrastructure facilities, but that were affected the sheriff's department. So I did want to highlight that there's a few extra dollars going there that may not be noted by the public, but are actually going to the public safety.
Right. Yeah. You're talking about a couple of air handlers and some roof repair, and that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. That's those potholes, in the road, and we're now down to the point where we're filling the potholes, but eventually we're going to have to start looking at the base and the infrastructure of the buildings and stuff. And you make a good point, Commissioner, on the jail, on the things that we do in the jail. Bless you. Our jail is the largest single jail in the state of Colorado. By a fairly significant amount, and it is typically holding, like I said, in the ballpark of about 1,550 to 1,600 inmates a day right now. We've been as high as 1,720. it is a big complex. You all toured it. You got a firsthand look at what's going on down there. That is probably the thing that our community doesn't see the most, is what it is where 2/3 of the money from our budget goes, and that goes to maintain that facility and the personnel that work there.
All right, I think we have Commissioner Vanderwerf. Go ahead.
So I appreciate also, I'd like to echo Commissioner Gonzalez's point of I appreciate the efforts of the Sheriff's Office, all the great work that you're doing in a tough job. And I make particular note of some uses of advanced technologies, some software updates, which I think, as you stated, are going to be exceptionally helpful, the use of telemedicine. And I was not aware of this statistic about possible reduction of maybe 70% of these transports to local hospitals. That would really be big, because it's not only of great benefit to the Sheriff's Office, but it's also of benefit to the hospitals, who often provide the medical services without reimbursement. So it's going to be helpful to the community as well. And I appreciate also the purchase of the Wildland fire truck. I actually do want to go see that. I do have some questions, though. The first one is, I know that we've been getting some leveraging from the state with regard to marijuana enforcement budget. What's in a quick nutshell? What are those numbers? And if you don't have them off the top of your head, I can just get them from you later. My understanding is that there was previously a really small number, and I'm hopeful that it's bigger today.
I'll take a wag at it unless somebody's got the specific number. I think our marijuana enforcement budget grant is in the ballpark of about $350,000. 450,000. Okay. How much was it? So okay. 450,000 for the fiscal year. We share that with the DA. We give 100,000 to the DA's office, and they have dedicated a prosecutor for specifically prosecuting marijuana-related cases. We take the other 350,000 and we spread that out over overtime use, equipment purchases, and stuff, which again is part of how we squeeze the budget. And just to give you an idea, over the year we see 7,572 plants, 1,862 pounds of processed marijuana, and made 51 arrests.
Wow.
Huge impact. Just the other day.
That is a huge impact.
Yeah, just the other day we had 500 pounds of processed marijuana that we got off of what we call a knock and talk.
So it is my understanding with regard to the statute that the state is supposed to help local law enforcement and other agencies involved in marijuana use across the state to reimburse the social costs. So my bet is, first of all, that's a bigger number than I was aware of, so I'm very happy to hear that number. My guess is also it's probably not covering all of your expenses in taking care of the social costs. So if there's still a continued shortfall in there, I'd be interested in knowing that number at a future time, because I'm going to continue to do the best I can anyway to advocate for the state to pay those social costs as they should be as per the legislation. And with regard to the red flag bill, just a quick question I want to ask. I understand that it's been challenging to try to get to the implementing instructions that would tell everybody how to operate that red flag bill. Is that still true? They're having trouble getting to those implementing instructions? Because I've heard nothing, and I think they've continued to have trouble. I think I can understand why they would have that trouble, but I'm just looking for a confirmation on that.
Yeah, it is still going on tomorrow afternoon. As a matter of fact, the area chiefs are meeting with Chief Judge Bain in my office to have a discussion specifically about that, to lay out where we stand with regard to the search and seizure of firearms under the red flag bill, and our concerns with the development of any of the protective orders that fall out. But yeah, we're working diligently locally. Janet, can you help? That doesn't take effect until sometime in the first quarter, is that right? Do you know? It does in January? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And then, so they still are having challenges with that, and I do worry about what those implementing instructions ultimately will look like. I appreciate what you all are doing with regard to replacement services that have to be in place in January with regard to medical and mental health services, and this care process that would be locally based, which I think is really, really important, because whoever the vendor is going to be, whoever they are, they're going to have an investment in succeeding because they live here, they work here, and they want their reputation to be maintained. So I think there's real value in that local model. So I like what you're pursuing very much along those lines. And as you're well aware, Sheriff, I've been trying to do what I can to find other sources of funding to help us succeed in getting to that model. And then one last comment is being the co-chair or chair of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, and it's not an answer you have to necessarily provide right now, but if there's more that the council can do to help you and the other law enforcement agencies, I'm all ears. I want to hear about that. I think we're starting to do some really great stuff in there, but there's probably a lot we're missing as well. So, continuing that conversation, I think, would be awesome.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the relationships that we have locally that help us put together collaborative response to some of the community-based issues, the mental health and medical issues. The work that you're heading up with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, the addition of all of the things that we've been trying to put in place gives us the ability to leverage existing funds. That's why we don't come back 5 years in a row. We're finding ways we save a nickel here and apply it there. We're doing everything that we can to work inside those confines, because it's incumbent upon every one of us to skinny our budgets as much as we can, do the things that we can do with the budgets that we have. And frankly, I think we're getting down to that point where we're about at the nitty gritty. And that's why I'm talking about, we can keep filling these potholes, but eventually we've got to start looking at that road base, and we've got to figure out a way to do that. A couple of weeks ago, the budget office put up a slide that was almost shocking to a lot of people that were watching, and that was the slide of what our local mill levy is compared to the 10-county Front Range survey, where the county's piece of that is 8.1 mills, and everyone else on that bar chart, I don't know if that shocked you guys, but it sure shocked me. And then you look at the sales tax, and we're the exact opposite. We're heavily dependent on sales tax. And my concern, and the concern of a number of others, is that a softening of the economy, a weakening consumer confidence could dramatically affect sales tax in a huge way in a short period of time. When 30% of our budget is based off of our public safety sales tax, and a very large percentage of the general fund budget is based on sales taxes, I would sure hate to see our economy slip to the point that we can't provide essential services that we've been talking about today, cost-saving measures aside.
Thank you.
All right, anything else from the board? I think we have a comment or a question from the public here.
Deborah Stout-Meininger, community advocate, citizen scientist. First of all, I want to say that I totally always support all divisions of our law enforcement agencies, always have, always will. But there are some concerns that sometimes can be covered by the interjurisdictional agreements between the different municipalities in the Front Range. But I know the job for the law enforcement can be challenging even on a good day. But I've had a lot of contacts from people in El Paso County areas, because on the social media forums, there's been a lot of conversation about loss of personnel with El Paso County Sheriff's Office. And I thought this was a good place to address it proactively in a positive way. The information that I have received is that in August, El Paso County lost 37 personnel, and in September they lost 32. And my question is, because I've not found anything in the mainstream media about it, how will that be addressed? On what kind of timeline? Will it affect the staffing of the E911 and who is more seasoned operators there, and how many trainees are going to have? So that does help the public to deal with it in a more positive way on a personal basis, when they're aware of timelines and these kinds of issues. But right now, it's causing a lot of concern. And I thought when this was coming up in these presentations, that this would be the best time to address it.
I think the sheriff is prepared to answer your question.
Absolutely. So to start with, our comm center is fully staffed. We added 10 additional staff to the comm center this year. They are fully staffed, so they have 0 vacancies. The turnover rate is sitting today at about 10.3, 10.5% attrition rate. We have roughly 850 employees, so at 10%, we're going to lose 85 a year. That is actually down from what it has been percentage-wise over the last few years. But keep in mind that we have added a very large number of people to the association or to the organization since 2012 with the addition of the public safety tax. That's the first thing. The second thing is like I pointed out earlier in that PERF report, and I'd be happy to share one of these PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum executive summaries with you, ma'am. This is not a local issue. This is an issue that is seen across the country and in some cases internationally. And a lot of it has to do with public perception of law enforcement and the public appreciation or lack of public appreciation of public safety, that as well. Then you factor in issues that are engaged in the operation of a jail. 2/3 of our personnel work in the jail. You guys have toured it. We just sit here and talk about safety and security issues. We talk about salary issues. We talk about injuries to deputies. It goes on and on and on. And you have to ask yourself, the true heroes of our organization work inside that facility day in and day out. They're the ones that are exposed to the incarcerated citizens of our community, and they're not always happy to be there. And so a lot of people make life choices to move on. A lot of them make choices to stay. There's not a whole lot we can do about that other than to do the best that we can to provide them safe working safe working facilities, number one, and number two, to pay them and provide benefits to them that make them feel worthwhile. So I hope that helps. Yeah.
Janet Huffer, I just want to add to that. This is something that I track almost on a daily basis for the sheriff and under sheriff is what our turnover rate is and how many people we're losing both from sworn and civilian. On average, our sworn loss is approximately 4 to 5 people per month. And then for civilians, it's about 3 to 4 as well. But I also want everybody to be reminded that these are some of the lower paying positions that in general across the economy are more of a higher turnover type job in any industry. So as far as our cops go, we have done very well with our retention this year, all things considered with the type of environment that they're working in right now. I think that in September and October, at most, we lost like 7 and 5, and then maybe there's even just 4 this month. So whatever statistics are coming out about losing 36 cops is absolutely wrong.
All right, thank you.
Any other clarification?
Real quick.
Part of the concerns were also triggered by long answer times, for certain emergencies that were called in at times, and it was just out there to the consumers and the citizens that it was because there was low staffing temporarily. And so they became concerned about it, and so I was getting a lot of contacts asking me the questions. So, to address specifically those 2 numbers, were they just mostly, you said a large portion of your people and turnovers are in the jail population, and that would probably pull on your people in the deputies in the field. Those kind of things are what they need the explanations about, not to minimize it on the wrong side and say all those numbers are wrong, because somebody based those numbers on something. And when they're that large for August and September, that's something we need to address proactively in a positive way, not minimalize it and say, no, there's no way that's even close. because I don't think that's quite the right way to go. And thank you.
So I agree, but the numbers they're not what social media is reporting. So, I suppose if someone were to ask us, they would get the right answer, but that's not what we experience. So.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for all you do, Mr. Sheriff.
Thanks, sir.
Public Works. Dun, dun, dun.
It's a good day with the sheriff's talking about potholes.
Trying to help you out there.
Trying to
Set
help
it
me
up for
out.
you.
Good lead-in.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Ready when you are.
Please,
Oh, sorry, I was waiting on you.
just start. Let's go.
Scott Cuthbertson, Executive Director of Public Works. Our organization chart, I have about 238 employees. I want to highlight on here the ones that we don't usually talk about, and that would be our customer service folks. As many of you know, customer service and the way that citizens contact us regarding complaints and whatnot has increased, basically doubled in the last year with the use of the citizen engagement system. And that staff gets a lot of response from citizens, and we deal a lot with complaints, particularly about gravel road conditions and potholes and things of that nature. Our larger divisions, our fleet management division, we'll talk a lot about them today. They manage the fleet for everybody in the county with the exception of the sheriff. Our engineering division does a lot of our planning and coordination and project management for our capital projects, as well as our internal maintenance programs and our contracted maintenance programs. Our highway division, that's our operations folks. They do snow removal, chip sealing, gravel road maintenance, things of that nature. And then, of course, we have our admin section, which includes our resource management, training staff, and my office staff. On the fleet management side, we have about a $43 million fleet, approximately 1,271 vehicles, everything from a road grader to a lawnmower, and a chainsaw is maintained for the entire county. And we support 20 county departments and elected offices with that fleet. Some of the things we focused on is our telematics in our fleet. We get better information about the condition of the vehicles. If a vehicle throws a fault code, an email will go to the fleet management and they will call that operator and ask them to bring in that vehicle if it's warranted for repair. Additionally, it helps us monitor geolocation of those vehicles during the day, optimize route efficiencies. We watch driver behavior, things of that nature. This has been, for the last couple of years, focused primarily on our heavy fleet. We are starting to roll that out into our light fleet so we can apply those same things across the light fleet for us. We spend a lot of energy, as you all know. Also in a light fleet, we're looking at improving our solutions, looking at technology to help us pool administrative vehicles, reduce the overall size of the light fleet over time, maybe shave 10 to 20% off of that fleet where folks can share them between departments, things of that nature. Upgraded snow and ice control equipment. You know, we've put a lot of energy on snow and ice removal. We have all the technology in place now to conduct anti-icing operations using salt brine. And we spent 2 weeks recently conducting our training with our operations staff on our highway folks and worked on how to apply that, how to mix that, how to get it on the road, and what roads to put it on, things of that nature. Some of the capital successes for fleet management, we recently replaced a lift and about a third of the floor at the Mark Dabbling facility, which is where we do most of our maintenance for our light vehicles. With the heavy vehicle lease equipment program, or equipment lease program, and our light vehicle purchasing program, we've been able to replace 43 medium and heavy units that are either in or on order, and 26 light vehicles this year for county departments. The average age there at 9.2 years is a little bit deceptive. We have a number of vehicles that are well over 16 years in our fleet, and it's caused some concerns with some of the condition of some of these vehicles in some of the departments, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. Just for perspective, just under 6,000 work orders completed by our mechanics. If you recall, about 2 years ago, we implemented a weekend shift to conduct services so that our heavy equipment will be available during the week for our operators when they're scheduled to work Monday through Thursday. And about 1,200 of those, or a third of those services are being done on the weekends, and increasing our availability time for our equipment during our scheduled work periods. Capital replacement budget, just under $2 million. Our critical needs, which we've discussed, include 3 years at $200,000 a year to replace the heavy lifts at the Acres facility. This is the lifts that we use to work on our graders, our snowplows, our very heavy trucks, and they are aging out, and we need to have a consistent replacement cycle to ensure that they are safe for our operators and reliable so we can get the maintenance done, get the equipment out the door. Light fleet, as I indicated, we have some challenges with our light fleet. We're asking for $450,000 ongoing, which will put us at if it's a consistent number, will put us at a 16-year replacement cycle on our light fleet as it exists today. If we can reduce 10 to 15% of that using other measures, that'll probably reduce that down to about the 13 to 14-year range. And as new heavy equipment comes in, the newer diesel engines require diesel exhaust fluid. We currently have a temporary facility to fill those tanks on our vehicles. It is operationally problematic for us. It is inefficient. At our outlying yards, we purchase the DEF in the 2.5-gallon jugs, which is about 3 times the cost of the bulk DEF. My staff is working with facilities. We have 2 options we're looking at for how to install that, and it'll allow us to reduce our wait times in the mornings and the evenings when folks are getting fueled, getting out. It's also a lot safer for us. And the fluid is cheaper this way if you buy it in bulk. On the transportation, engineering, highway side, as we talked about, we do planning and design for our projects. Inspection and maintenance, we oversee our commercial projects with our inspectors. We oversee our contracted projects with inspectors and make sure they're compliant. And we do emergency infrastructure repairs as needed. Our folks are great at just shifting gears and getting out and solving an emergency as needed. Wildland fire support, we've done a little bit of that with our mechanized crews this year, knocking veneer. We haven't had to do a whole lot of that this year, but our folks stand ready if we get another 117 type fire. They conduct training. We work very well with the sheriff's folks in terms of training. They've conducted the certification for our folks to make sure they're safe and prepared to go out and operate in that fire, and we've worked on interoperability with them as well. On our snow removal side of the house, we got to 2 weeks of training, and we were able to practice that last week with our first storm of the year. We were, again, implementing our anti-icing, which will allow us to reduce our material costs and our labor over time, which will allow us to save some of our funds on snow removal. Stormwater permit, we've put a lot of energy into stormwater compliance over the last year. There were some new rules that were implemented July 1st, federal rules we were in compliance with. We continue daily to conduct inspections. Our stormwater manager position is currently open for hire, and our stormwater quality manager has decided to retire, and we're going to replace that position as well. And then we'll hire a couple of stormwater engineers, and we will assume the role of reviewing the developer plans, take that over from PCD. Just some numbers for you. About 2,300 lane miles of pavement, 2,100 lane miles of gravel, about 270 bridges in the county. Those numbers fluctuate depending on whether somebody acquires land from us or not, but pretty consistent numbers overall. We add about 30 a year, drop about 10 a year, something like that. Relevant statutes, we've talked about MS4 permits and Clean Water Act. In addition, we've put a lot of energy in the ADA compliance. I know we have a workshop coming up with you with ADA under the purview of the facilities director, but we get a lot of questions about compliance with ADA rules in the right-of-way. For the last several years, all the concrete work we have done in the right-of-way has been in compliance with federal standards for ADA. Additionally, we are currently rewriting our engineer criteria manual to support the ADA requirements. Strategic plan goals. I want to highlight the last bullet on there, making sure the public understands the true cost of our deferred capital projects and maintenance. As I've discussed with you all, we have spent a lot of energy evaluating our current quality of our pavement so that we can give accurate numbers on what the pavement replacement and sustainment program will look like for us over the next 10 years. And we've spent a lot of energy working on our major transportation corridor plan, see what our capital improvements need to be over the next 40 years, working very heavily with the PIO office to make sure that we are able to tell that story in a transparent and open fashion. Major capital projects in process 2019. Monument Hill Road is just about wrapped up. We look forward to getting that completely open. Mark Shufflin Meadowbrook has been a long time coming, currently changing that intersection, putting in a stoplight in there. And Struthers Glen Eagle Roundabout is another major project that's underway. As you can see, our number of customer service requests have doubled. The two heaviest ones obviously are asphalt and gravel. In order to maintain compliance on dust abatement for dust control measures between state and federal laws, we do 152 lane miles of dust abatement. With the recent acquisition of our gravel road reclamation system, we've been able to speed up the dust abatement process. Instead of taking about 3 days to do a road, we can do it in one. All of you have seen that system in operation. We were able to conduct 68 lane miles of chip seal operations. This is a resurfacing program that we do in-house with internal assets. We've gravelled about 32 lane miles of our road and 46 miles of pavement. Major projects underway. I talked about a couple of these. Charter Oak Ranch Road is pending the build grant. We are hoping that is successful. We recently had a meeting with Senator Gardner. Jen Irvin, county engineer, did a fantastic job of laying out what our piece of that is, and we look forward to getting that done. We've got the Falcon Park and Ride and the Meridian projects underway out in Falcon, which will reduce some of the pressure there at the 24 Meridian intersection, but we're about 2 years from completion on those as well. Fountain Mesa Caballero is under design. We'll get that done. One that's near and dear to my heart, Meridian and Rex. We're doing some preliminary design to determine what to do with that intersection and improve the sight lines there. And Highway 105, we're in property acquisition and some of these others. A lot of projects in here. If you have specific questions on any of them, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions on any of that? Nope, seeing none, please
Thank you,
continue.
Mr. Chair. Some of the successes this year in our organization are internal training and certification programs. We've got a new training manager who's put a tremendous amount of energy into that. As we continue to bring in new employees, we want to make sure that we train them to our standards and make sure that we document that training should there be any potential liability challenges. In the coming year, we look forward to a more stringent in-service training program and adding in things in addition to our snow removal training. We've upgraded our traffic control signals, converting them to LED, replacing aged controllers so that they're reliable, and replacing optical cameras with radar so that they don't get sun blind, they don't get blinded by snow on the system, and keep it more reliable. The radar is much more effective for us. We talked a little bit about our salt brine. We are in the process of putting storage out in our outlying yards so trucks can refill without having to return to our main facility to do so. We have a sediment evaporation basin constructed at our facility at Acres, which allows us to not have to take those products to a landfill and get charged for that and reduce our labor costs in dealing with those things. The gravel road reclamation crew we've talked about. We've been in operation for a few months on that. We have 33 miles completed year to date. As we continue to expand that process, we get more efficient with it. It'll overall reduce our chemical use and allow us to resurface some of those gravel roads that are somewhere between rebuild and good condition, and allows us to maintain them less and repurpose those greater hours for other things. We had a challenge in our workforce. We were down about 46 positions this summer due to a variety of different turnover. We had some long-term employees retire. We had some folks leave to go chase money elsewhere, and some disciplinary issues, things of that nature. So working with our friends at the Workforce Center and Human Resources and the PIO shop, and got some great support from local media and did some different things in how we recruit. We had hosted a job fair at our Acres facility in September. We had 370 job applicants appear at that facility that day, conducted 62 interviews on site, and hired about 30 employees that day. Or as a result of that day, excuse me. It took a little longer than that. Some of those are still onboarding, but that allows us to be prepared better for our snow removal season as we onboard them and get them involved. We took a look at our hiring process and where we were losing folks in the hiring process and changed our methodology. We would do a practical exam for our CDL drivers, and we would lose probably a third of our applicants. So rather than do that, what we'll do is hire them and show them the way we want it done. That has been very effective for us so far. You've heard us talk about the automated truck wash facility. They actually ran water through it this week. We've experienced a couple of challenges that we've got to address to get equipment in there with a snowplow blade on there, but it should be up and fully functional minus that here shortly. That will allow us to repurpose a lot of man hours that folks have spent hand washing our heavy equipment, and that'll make us much more efficient there as well. One of our priorities has been community outreach. We've done probably half a dozen or so touch-a-truck type events in the last several months. With the support of the county administrator, Amy Folsom, we were able to do an open house in June and Employee Appreciation Day in June. We had about 120 visitors come out to our site. And the idea is to just let folks understand what we do, how we do it, and the challenges that we face. We have a new new county highway map that's updated. I have the prototype sitting on my desk for 2 versions of that. The last one was updated 2003. There have been a few changes, to county roads network in that time frame. I like the new product. It's very exciting, and we'll get that final proof approved and get it out here shortly. We talked about ADA compliance. We've talked about MS4 compliance. We had a little snowstorm that we had to deal with, and I can't tell you how proud I am of the response our folks had during that effort. We had folks risk their lives to get those roads open, and they just ran with it and got things done. We've talked about anti-icing technologies. A couple of examples of our rapid response for road challenges we had to face. South Academy, if you recall, we had to close due to a sinkhole. We were able to get it open again in about 12 hours with the help of a contractor, and most of my staff just repurposed that day and just kept working until it was done. Additionally, down in Boca Raton Heights, we had a series of culverts wash out. We lost a chunk of that roadway. We worked through the weekend and got it open the following Monday. Tabor retention projects are in process. A couple of those on that list we discussed. Some opportunities for us. We continue to look at snow removal and how we can be more efficient and optimize the way that our plows and our graders are used. My fleet staff and engineering staff and highway staff are working at trying to find the most effective way to get those snow routes open as fast as possible by optimizing, using a system similar to, like, for example, UPS or FedEx uses to get their routes planned. Program of projects, we have projects being funded by multiple sources on multiple timelines, and I've got my engineering staff working with Kevin Maston, the new deputy director, to essentially get a single source document for yourselves and for the public to look at so they can understand the timeline for projects, what's involved at a project, and more importantly, what the spend curve looks like on those projects so we know when the funds are going out the door. The life cycle of a construction project, as you know, not a lot of money goes out the front on the property acquisition, planning, and engineering side of the house. There's a large outlay during the construction phase, and then when you get into paving, it skyrockets from there, and then there's a little bit of cleanup costs, so there's a large spike in that. We just want to do a better job of telling our story on those projects and how that money's getting spent and when we can expect it to be spent. Transparency on road quality, I'll talk about here in a minute, but we want to take that pavement quality information and work with PIO to make that public facing so that folks know what the condition of their road is and understand the challenges we face in maintaining their roads. We've talked about the gravel road reclamation system. It will allow us, again, to improve the condition of a percentage of our gravel roads and also allow us to repurpose greater hours that, typically we maintain a gravel road on a 3 to 6 week basis. Our successes so far on the ones that we've reclaimed is we don't have to touch them for anywhere between 3 months and a year. That allows us to repurpose those hours elsewhere. We look forward to, by January 1st, taking over the plan review for stormwater quality management. We're currently advertising, or will be advertising this weekend, our asset manager position. Once we get the asset manager on board, we will move toward acquisition of an asset management software program, and that will allow us to, 1, maintain an inventory of all of our roadway furniture, 2, the condition of that roadway furniture, and then 3, make the best possible decisions about where to put our available funds to have the greatest impact on our roadway network. That's a very long process. And we want to get that under. It's also not a cheap process, but it's also essential for how we maintain our network. And local road safety program, working with our friends at CDOT and Federal Highway to make sure that our roads are safe as best as possible. Some of our challenges: sustainable long-term funding strategy for major maintenance and capital. As you know, we execute the best we can as efficiently as we can with the funds we have. We continue to improve that, but we've got some significant challenges in that area. I've heard many times this board talk about unfunded mandates. In the last year, the state implemented utility locate requirements for gravel road maintenance, which had not previously been required. This is a significant challenge for us in that we have to do a locate for about every mile of roadway that we touch, keeping in mind we maintain 1,100 miles of gravel road a year. The rule was implemented. The state or the organization at the state level that manages this was not really prepared to implement it, so we've been facing some serious challenges with that, and it's creating an enormous amount of work for us. Additionally, we are also responsive to permits as they come to us, and we have to do the same kind of work at our level. So just yet another expensive project that we've had to undertake. ADA compliance assessment. We are taking the information we use that we purchase for pavement quality, and we're leveraging that as much as we can to identify where our ADA challenges are. And at some point, in the near future, we will go out and do physical inspections of those intersections and of those crosswalks and determine what needs to be done in those areas. Then we'll have a good, accurate cost assessment for that and have a project plan probably within a year. Paved road maintenance backlog, we've discussed. We have about 2,300 lane miles of roadway. 653 miles of that, or about 28%, does not currently meet minimum pavement quality standards. At our current funding rate, by 2028, that number will increase to 1,100 miles. To maintain our existing pavement quality status, we would require an additional $9 million above current funding to sustain the level that we are at today. Just as a snapshot, we do an overlay of approximately 2% of our network every year. In order to sustain our current network, it would need to be in the 7 to 10% range based on our current climate conditions and the soil conditions and things of that nature. Major transportation corridor plan identified about $846 million in improvements over the next 24 years. The road impact fee currently projects about $137 million toward that effort. PPRT capital improvement projects currently funded at $68 million. So that leaves us a significant unfunded requirement of about $641 million, or about $24 million a year. Gravel road maintenance, we currently maintain or rebuild 15 to 30 of our lane miles a year with our in-house crews re-graveling those roadways. At about 30 lane miles a year, that puts us on somewhere between a 65 and 70 year cycle. Industry standards about 7 to 10 years. So we are working to educate citizens as they call us and are frustrated with the condition of their roadway. We do the best we can with what we have. Capital needs in the transportation and engineering highway side of the house. We have some facilities that are aging and need to be improved to protect our fleet and to make our operations more efficient. Some of these are extended timeline requirements, some of these are not. Our yard down in Fountain, we may have to relocate quickly just based on improvements in that area, growth in that area. It's not real compatible with what's going on around it, and it's going to be overtaken by intersection here shortly. So in addition, in our Calhan facility, we have a 3-bay maintenance facility out there that we can't get some of our equipment in. It's too large for the maintenance bays that are out there. So we have folks that are forced to work on heavy equipment outside in winter conditions. Additionally, in the Calhan yard, which is about 20-25% of our equipment's out there, and we have it staged out in that area. The current wash facility out there is an outdoor concrete pad with a pressure washer. And it's just not safe for our workforce, not safe for our employees, and it's horribly inefficient. So these are things we want to work on and look forward to taking care of those. Operational needs, we, again, unfunded mandates. We had the requirement to meet the improved stormwater requirements. We funded those in-house. We've hired that FTE. We've taken that out of Hyde to make sure that we have the employees in hand to do that. Then the asset management platform we discussed. In order to buy the software and conduct the inventory of the stuff, it's about $1 million a year to get to that point over the next 5 years. And with that, Mr. Chair, pending your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Cuthbertson? Yep, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mentioned earlier about public safety. This was has been my other priority since being elected was, roads and public safety. And this is what I get the most calls on, is our roads. And so it's something I think we've, you did see an increase last year to these roads budgets. This year, I'm hoping we find a little extra, whether it's from underspending or where we can, but this is an area I would like to still be able to get a little bit more. Squeezing the turnip, I get it. In a very, very tight budget, this is where I would like to try to find something else to get to roads, because this is absolutely what people call me about. Thank you.
Yeah, roads are it for us, and I'll tell you, it's the frustrating aspect of it is we all know how important roads and bridges are, yet it seems to be one of the only areas that we can go affect cuts when it needs to happen. And we're just at kind of a perfect storm this year. We have a booming economy, but with all of the mandates coming from the state, with the increase in cost of personnel and the workforce requirements there, with the, again, booming economy, workforce has a lot of options to go, and that's kind of the free market has driven the cost of labor up in our community. And you're a labor-intensive organization, it makes it tough. And, we're all here. We want to be as great stewards of the taxpayers' dollars we can, and we want to make sure we're maintaining the roads to the best of our ability. But when it comes time to choosing whether or not we're going to fill a pothole or make the jail safe, well, what are our choices? We really don't have a choice there. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate all you're doing, Scott. Tremendous effort to make sure, as Commissioner Gonzalez said, we're squeezing every ounce of blood out of that turnip to affect the best possible outcomes for the citizens of El Paso County in terms of road maintenance and bridges. So thanks for all you're doing, and I promise you, we don't ignore you on purpose. It just seems to be that's where the circumstances direct us. So.
Thank you, Mr.
We'll
Chair.
continue to work on it. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I appreciate very much several of the things that you have in the charts. The wildland fire support, for example, the new de-ice capability, which I'm looking forward to hearing great things about this season. The capital equipment upgrades, which we've made a lot of progress on, and even on something like the truck wash, and originally I was very skeptical of that, but what I appreciated is that you and the team came in and talked to me about the value of that truck wash, and of course, most of the time it's the total story that gets you to a place where you decide you're willing to support it. I was pretty amazed that there was not a commercial truck wash in the anywhere near, where we do our work with DPW. That was interesting to me. And then you were able to walk through the labor savings and so forth. So it really is essentially a capital investment that's going to help us be more efficient everywhere else. So, and one last thing, awesome job fair. I think that's great, because it was beginning to look like one of our challenges was in buying the capital equipment, not actually having the people to run the equipment. So I'm glad that we have made progress with that. You know that I remain interested in us getting to that asset management capability, the value of it, and being able to manage the fleet. I believe that's what that is in reference to. You and I have talked about that. So I look forward to seeing success with that. And it's just a minor thing, but I do believe on chart 13, it says that Chapita Park Road is Fountain, and I believe that's Cascade. Just for clarification, it's the top one. Just making sure there's not
actually a Fountain Road, Fountain Drive up there.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, that answers that. Thank you.
It's like a four-way intersection.
Yeah, yeah. And then the with regard to the maintenance numbers, with regard to the capital investments that we've done, which we know is not enough, but we have had progress. We should be seeing some improvement in the maintenance, and I think it's there. So, one of the things is kind of like over time looking at lane miles and chip seal and pavement and gravel road refurbishment and those kinds of things. And I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to demonstrate. I know it's not available today because we're kind of just getting into many of these things, but to see those mile numbers increasing because of that capital investment. So I do look forward to seeing that down the road.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the board for understanding where our workforce is and doing the best they can to try to improve the financial situation for our employees. I mean, it's not a huge number, but every little bit helps in trying to posture to increase their salaries. So,
Thanks. We appreciate your efforts. All right. Who's handling economic development for us today? come on down.
Please commence.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Lobato, El Paso County Economic Development Department. I'm here this morning on behalf of Crystal Latier, who wasn't able to join us. So I do apologize for any snafus. This kind of landed in my lap this morning. As you can see here, this is our organizational chart of our department. We are led by, Crystal Latier, who is our executive director. We also have 4 positions that directly support Crystal Latier in the department, and we are also host agency to the Pikes Peak Small Business Development Center there on the right-hand side of the organizational chart. Our office is uniquely tasked with a holistic approach to economic development through diverse incentives for businesses and leveraging federal and state resources for housing and community development. Our department focuses on 3 main areas, including business incentives, community initiatives, and housing. Our business incentive components include our Enterprise Zone program, which is a state income tax credit aimed at encouraging business development, job creation, retention in those economically distressed areas of our community, both in Teller County and El Paso County. We have our Business Loan Fund, which is created to retain and expand and diversify the economic development base of the county. That is administered locally by the Pikes Peak Regional Development Corporation. We also have the Commercial Aeronautical Zone, which is an incentive that can rebate the county sales tax paid by businesses engaged in a variety of aeronautical activities on the Colorado Springs Airport or directly adjacent to the airport. We also have the Opportunity Zones program, which is a federal tax incentive designed to incentivize investors to reinvest their capital gains in economically distressed communities. Our department is also the host agency to the Pikes Peak Small Business Development Center, which offers free consulting and practical training by industry professionals, as well as business resources for those in the community. Our community initiative components include our Community Development Block Grant Program, also referred to as CDBG, our Enterprise Zone contribution projects. We currently have 58 contribution projects between the areas of Teller County and El Paso County, and they range in variety from visitor attractions and events, capital campaigns for community facilities, homeless support operations, job training programs, economic development organizations, workforce housing for nonprofits and government entities in our community. El Paso County is also able to issue nonprofit bonds to local nonprofits in the area. Housing components include our El Paso County Housing Authority, which is staffed by economic development staff. Our Housing Trust Fund, which serves as a gap funder for local developers looking to develop multifamily housing in our region. Our Single Family Turnkey Plus program, which provides down payment assistance for home buyers in the region. Our Multifamily Mortgage Revenue Bond program, as well as fair housing resources. Our programs operate under mandates and state statutes. Federal mandates include the Opportunity Zone program, which was implemented through the 2017 Tax Cuts and Job Act, and must adhere to various sections of the Internal Revenue Code, which are still under review. The Community Development Block Grant Program is governed by the U.S. Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. The Small Business Development Center is governed by the U.S. Small Business Act. And lastly, the private activity bonds must adhere to requirements identified by the Internal Revenue Code. State mandates and statutes that we adhere to: the Enterprise Zone and Commercial Aeronautical Zone are governed by the Colorado Urban and Rural Enterprise Zone Act. Private activity bonds must also adhere to various sections of the Colorado County and Municipality Revenue Bond Act. The El Paso County Housing Authority is governed by State Statute 29-4-503. And our department's strategic plans, operating indicators, and capital projects that direct our activities encourage the growth of existing businesses and recruitment of new businesses. We achieve this through a variety of our business incentives, including the Enterprise Zone state income tax credits, as well as our revolving loan fund administered by PPRDC. We support and advocate for a strong federal presence in related businesses, promote a positive community vision, which is attractive to businesses and employees, and we expand tourism opportunities and emphasize its impact on the economy. You'll notably see that with some of our Enterprise Zone contribution projects focused on those tourism components, such as the Pikes Peak Summit Complex, and the Philharmonic, the Fine Arts Center, Manitou Springs Heritage Center, the Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum, and the United States Olympic Museum. We also promote a variety of housing options and opportunities for our region's neighborhoods. Most recently, you approved a multifamily housing bond for Winfield Apartments in the amount of $28 million, which is an acquisition rehab project for 160 housing units to keep those housing units affordable in our community. And they're located at the Powers and Stetson Hills region of town. Budgetary highlights. Through partnerships and administration of federal and state programming, the Economic Development Department continues to operate effectively and efficiently through funding support by the Community Development Block Grant Program through HUD, El Paso County Housing Authority, El Paso County Enterprise Zone, now known as the Pikes Peak Enterprise Zone, and the Small Business Administration. Our base budget and critical needs are very minor. As you'll note in the slide, our 2018, 2019, and 2020 budget remain very flat and unchanged, and we do not have any 2020 critical needs addressed. Thank you, and do you have any questions?
Commissioner Brimmer.
It's Russian roulette here on who's going first. But thank you for being here today, and I hope you will pass along our comments to Crystal and her excellent leadership there too. You know, as I'm the commissioner liaison to the Housing Authority, and I've been very, very impressed at kind of the strategic leadership of that board. Yes. that is making on the ground decisions. You know, often as we've heard from public health, the coroner, the sheriff, and Tim in community development on how the issues of homelessness are affecting them and their roles and their jobs. And oftentimes the question is what can and should government do about this? How can we address it? And I am just so impressed that everything done in your department is having a true impact on that. And I'm impressed with the strategic nature of it. And for under $270,000 to our general fund is pretty impressive. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's certainly a great return on our investment, that's for sure. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was going to highlight the same. I was on the Housing Authority before, and I wanted to highlight the same. You did it much more eloquently than I ever could. Just thank you for all those things, the efforts. I did have one question. The opportunity zones, is there a deadline on when that the people can take advantage of the opportunity zones?
Those are currently under review, but they may be pushing out dates.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So here's where we are, just a little bit of housekeeping. We're through where we're supposed to be for lunch, but what we're going to do is have Ms. Cassidy give her 2020-2024 financial roadmap update now, and then we will break for lunch. And get us at least out of here 15 minutes earlier than we would have been otherwise.
Right. Good morning, Commissioners. Sherry Cassidy, CFO. For the critical needs summary, October 3rd, Nikki Simmons gave an update on where we are on our revenues and expenditures and with the preliminary balanced budget. So there hasn't been too many changes since that point. So I thought I'd use just a little bit of this time to basically go through and reconcile the difference between, or how we got from the, it's in your presentation from October 3rd, and it's slides 21, 22, and 23. So what those slides are is it was the 2019 approved roadmap, and then the 2020 newly requested critical needs, and then the 2020, how we got to the 2020 roadmap. So what this presentation does is it kind of will step you through each one of those. So on the first area is the county attorney. So their total critical needs request was 2 attorneys, 2 paralegals, and then some startup cost. So the way we were able to balance the budget is that we took 1 paralegal for the $74,000, and it's funded in the preliminary balanced budget. And then the other 2 attorneys and the second paralegal has been pushed out to future years. So that's kind of how you're seeing it in the presentation. Then on community services, those first 3 items, that request is actually from back in 2016, and he had requested $200,000 on each one of those items. We've funded him $150,000 on each one of those items in past budgets, so this was just the last part, the last $50,000 on each one of those to get him to the full funding on that one. The Black Forest Northern Nature Center, that's a brand new request, and we're anticipating that we will need funding for that in 2023. So it's on the roadmap, but it doesn't even show up until future years. But we just wanted to get it on the roadmap so that it was on everybody's radar. The criminal justice planning was the general support. That was the $12,000 he requested. That did not change. And then the same thing on the pretrial services and the veteran services. So that was a request for 2020, and we left that fully funded in the 2020 budget. For clerk and recorder, this was his 4 requests that he outlined in his presentation, and that's where in the Kronos upgrade, he's able to fund that one. The motor vehicle FTEs, he's reevaluating that one to see where we are in the future on that one. And then the phone bank upgrade and the upgrade of the state computers, he's able to fund that out of his own budget. For the countywide needs, this is all of facilities. So on facilities, the major facility improvements, that's where in 2019 we put $250,000, and the intent of that was to be an ongoing increase to his budget. We only had it in there as one time, so that's what that one does. The judicial building, the modernization of the elevators, the request was about $1.1 million. We broke that into 2 different years, so he's going to do part of it in 2020 and then the other part in 2021. The central utility plant, there's 2 items on it. Both of those need to be done in 2020, so they're both on there. Replace the rooftop unit out at CJC. That one needs to get done during 2020, so we also left that on the roadmap for this year, or this coming year. The sheriff's office and the Metro Jail, the roof replacement, and then the replacing the air handlers out there too on the sheriff's office over here off Fermahoe. We were able to shift both of those to 2021. Mr. Olson feels like those can wait another year, and it won't create any kind of an emergency on those. The fair and events complex for parking, these last 3 are ADA requests. We try to get those done as soon as we know that there is an ADA issue. So those 3 were left on the roadmap for the 2020. For district attorney, this is all of the district attorney's requests. And just because of our funding situation we have for this year, we chose to recommend that we fund him as a lump sum for $700,000. And then he will be able to take that funding and distribute it however he best sees fit. He will go over his items. He's the first item or first presentation right after lunch. For financial services, this is another item that's out in the future, and this is a really rough price, but we will eventually have to replace our financial system. So we just wanted this to start showing up on the roadmap, but it doesn't show up until out in 2024, and we'll refine that price as we get closer to it. That's a big number on there, but that's why I wanted it on there, because the maintenance on our current system will end in 2029, I believe was the year. So we have to start getting it, the implementation, getting it in place, getting the implementation done before that ends. HR will, Andrea will present right after the district attorney this afternoon, but she had a compliance position on the original roadmap for $77,000. And we also were able to get her a program called NeoGov. She thinks that the NeoGov will help out enough that she won't have to have that FTE. She'll reevaluate that in the future, but then that's what the NeoGov program is on there for the onboarding. Planning and community development, that's what Mr. Dossi discussed yesterday. We have that fully, or on Tuesday, we have that fully funded on here. And then public health, they had requested $1 million increase, and we had phased it in over several years. We did the first $200,000 for 2019. We're not going to do anything during 2020, but then in 2021, 2022, and 2023, then we'll phase in the rest of their increase. Public Works for the fleet side, these are the items that Mr. Cuthbertson just discussed. He had originally requested the $600,000 on the light fleet replacement. We're doing $450,000 in 2020 and potentially $150,000 in 2022, unless he sees that he's able to do something different with the light vehicles, and we may not need that in the future. But we've left it on the roadmap in case we do. And then countywide, the 1.5% allocation of the personnel budgets, those were items that were actually, we had a couple of items in 2022 and 2023 where we were trying to give funding for pay increases for employees out there. We pulled that funding back to 2020 because I know a lot of departments and offices are having issues with personnel, so we were trying to get whatever we could funded in 2020, so we managed to come up with a 1.5% allocation on that. The assessor, treasurer, IT item, that's going to be the maintenance on the new system for the assessor treasurer's office, and that will start in the 2021 roadmap. The Humane Society contract increase, that was an automatic increase that we had, so we needed to get it funded. So that's what that is in the 2020 budget. And then the countywide support for grant matching funds, we just wanted to try to get something into a pool to be able to match grants that, you know, a lot of times match, or we have to have 25%, 25% match. So this will give us a little bit of leverage. And again, we pushed that one out to 2021 also. And then just, is there any questions on how we got from one point to another on all of those items? Okay. So this is just kind of sums up where we are on everything. The presentation of the 2020 preliminary balanced budget was on October 3rd. That's done. Hearings number 2 and 3, that was Tuesday and today. We'll finish those this afternoon. We'll just have 3 more presentations this afternoon. Budget hearing number 4 is on November 14th, and that is the final direction from the board. That's where you guys will have the spreadsheet up there. You'll be able to go in and say, can we add this in, take this out? I'll have revised revenue numbers at that point. So if it looks like we may have any additional, possibly some one-time money that we could put in there for something, then I will know that at that time. And then on budget hearing number 5, that will be the final adoption. We're statutorily required to adopt by December 15th, so pretty much that's the December 10th. We need to do it on that day, and of course, we always have snow events, so December 12th is the backup for the approval. So, any questions?
No, what's he about to do with that candle's about the only question I have. Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much. We are going to stand in recess until 12:45. The meeting will come back to order. We're in the middle of agenda item number 10, where we're talking about budget presentations. I believe we are at the point in the discussion where we are going to hear from District Attorney Dan May.
Dan May, District Attorney. How are you this morning? Or this afternoon now?
We haven't relaxed the coat rules, so.
It's warmer today than Tuesday. Tuesday was cold.
As I go through my presentation, I know some of you have heard some of this before. Some of you, I guess Commissioner Williams isn't here today, but some of it you've heard last year because we were looking at a 2-year plan, quite frankly, at the DA's office. And so we laid out a lot of that last year. Some of you I know have been able to review tapes if you weren't here before. And then some of it I know is for the public. For those who don't know, I think one of the things you're going to learn today is we have an outstanding district attorney's office. We have some of the best prosecutors and attorneys, not just in the state of Colorado, but quite frankly in the entire country. We have more innovative programs than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. We do more with less, and you know that that's a pretty consistent message because one of the reasons people live here is they expect lower taxes. But we do more with less than any DA's office in the state of Colorado. And again, I'd put us up against any DA's office anywhere in the country. But quite frankly, we're getting overwhelmed. And if there's anybody here who doesn't think we're not working hard, put up your hand because we are working awfully hard. We've got a lot of things on our plate. We have a lot of cases on our plate. We've got some major cases that are being watched not only in Colorado, but nationally and internationally. And I think our people are performing at a top level because we put a lot into training. We put a lot into having the right professionals, and they do a great job. But quite frankly, without your help, and you've set out a plan for us to help, it's difficult to keep up with things. To go into our presentation, I know that some of you are familiar with our mission. You've seen this before. It is the mission of our office to administer justice. That's an important principle for us, and that's what I expect of my people every single day. When they come into court, they are to do justice. When they come into our office, quite frankly, that's one of the reasons we're able to attract and keep people who really want to make a difference in their community. That we are the only ones mandated to do justice. As we walk into the courtroom, we're the only ones who can charge people in that courtroom, and that's a heavy responsibility. We're also the only ones who can read a case and say, we think this person's not guilty, we're going to go in and dismiss this case because that's justice. And we should be as proud of the person that we prosecute, even up to murder or a death penalty case, as we are the one that we dismiss because we think they didn't do it. The defense attorney doesn't have either of those powers, nor does the judge. So that's our responsibility to really train young deputies how to handle those kinds of responsibilities. We advocate for victims and partner with law enforcement and citizens of the community in the deterrence and prevention of crime. I know Commissioner Bremer is now in our Not One More. We have a lot of unique things that only our DA's office does in the entire state. We invented juvenile diversion for the entire country. And so we're very proud that we do preventative programs, and we have more people in preventative programs than anybody, certainly in the state of Colorado. Quite frankly, at the same time, we're putting more people in prison than anybody in the state of Colorado. We have a real philosophy. We want to give people a second chance. And so we have a lot of diversion programs, a lot of problem-solving courts to give them those second chances. But if they keep repeating over and over and over, we're going to go after them because that brings down my crime rate. That's the 20% of the people doing 80% of the crime. And so you betcha we have more. The last stat I saw I think it was 36 people were sent to prison for habitual criminal charges as their top sentence, which aggravates the range of their sentencing by being habituals. 18 of those came out of El Paso County. We are not half the population of the state, but it comes back to our philosophy. You're going to see I've got a lot of people in preventative, but we're also going to put you away if you keep repeating. Our priorities are habitual criminal, violent crime, and if you perp on our kids. We're going to take those seriously right out the gate. We're not going to wait for things to get worse. We are recognized in the Constitution as an agency, as a state agency. We really are not a county agency. Now, you're my primary budget, but as you know, and we'll get to, well, actually, I'll just flash ahead. When Colorado was formed, there were 4 judicial districts, and at that time, our 4th judicial, which is what I am, went from one end of the state to the other, pretty much. Over time, that has changed. It takes a constitutional amendment. You may have seen there's some discussion of separating Arapahoe and Douglas, because Douglas in particular has grown so much. There are about 1 million people now in that jurisdiction. And so there's been serious discussion for a decade of voting in a 23rd judicial district in the future. We are a 2-county. You can see they range anywhere from 1 county, such as Pueblo is a 1 county, up to, I think it's 7 counties up there in the northeast corner of the state, the 13th. Part of that's based on the population, but that DA has some challenges with how far apart. Each county has its own courthouse, so they're spread pretty thin in terms of what they do. We have had a lot of news. It's kind of funny. I was on the phone with somebody the other day saying I'm the DA for the 4th Judicial, and because the governor in particular, quite frankly, kept calling me the El Paso County DA, they said, well, are you the El Paso County DA? And I had to explain that there's no such person as the El Paso County DA. There's no such person as the Teller County DA. I'm the 4th Judicial District, which includes both counties. I get that confusion, quite frankly, a lot out of Denver. And I'll be frank, I think there's a certain Denver-centric up there, and they don't necessarily recognize as much of the rest of the state and understand the differences. We cover El Paso Teller. We have 22 different law enforcement agencies, which you'll see here in a second that we've got a shot of that. We currently have 84 attorneys, 24 sworn investigators, and another 120 staff. Actually, the one we forgot to put in here is we average 125 volunteers per year. Gwen Stein does a fabulous job for us as a volunteer coordinator. She actually goes out and trains other agencies. If you have a agency that's looking to set up a volunteer program, she's excellent at helping train and set those up. For instance, she went up and helped Jefferson County DA's office, but she's done law enforcement agencies at the same time. And that's one of the reasons we're able to get by on our budget that we do. We currently have 18 district court judges. I'm sitting here now. You know, January 1, we're getting a 19th. We were, this time last year when I talked to you, we were at 17, and they've added two new judges. Quite frankly, the reason for that, I didn't bring it with me. I presented it last time. There was information throughout the state in the hearings in front of the legislature and Denver Post articles and Gazette articles about how much our crime has increased. Our crime across the state of Colorado has skyrocketed, started in about 2013. And quite frankly, that was some reform laws around theft and drugs and habitual criminal. They actually decriminalized habitual criminals, decriminalized drugs, decriminalized thieving in general. It took 2 bills over a couple of years to actually hit all the thieving things. There have been some studies out of California where they did the same thing that showed their crime rates skyrocketed over the next few years. The Denver Post noted, and the DA is actually the ones that produced the numbers, that our felony filings across the state of Colorado went up almost, I think it was 44% in 3 years. I'll get that exact figure as I go through this. And that's one of the things that has affected us. We've had bond reform laws that have affected us. We are more and more kind of going to current trends because we're going to see more and more bond reform. I think it actually started back in about 2012 or 13 that they had the first real bond reform. I've got another one that happened this year. And what's happening, quite frankly, is we're kind of going, if you remember the model in the 50s and 60s for mental health was to institutionalize people, and they deinstitutionalized in the 60s to where now we have some home, that's part of our homeless issue and other things. I'm seeing sort of a similar model right now that I've got legislators currently in the legislature that are advocating just get them out of prison without looking who the person is, what their crime is, those sorts of things, so that I'm going to that model that we're putting our criminals on the street to empty out our prisons. At the end of mine, I'll go through some of the current trends. You're actually going to see we're overcrowded in our prisons now only because our prison numbers are down. So we have closed prisons. We actually have fewer people in prison today. And then they say, look, our prisons are overcrowded. Well, it's because we've closed some, but I'll get to those numbers later on. And quite frankly, some of this also parallels what we've seen with marijuana. Since marijuana was legalized in Colorado, we get a few homicides every year. You certainly have talked, and the sheriff's been outspoken. Actually, both my sheriffs have been outspoken about specialty units just for marijuana we never had to have before, black market, and it affects a lot of crimes. Here's our partner agencies. We partner with local law enforcement. We partner with all the federal agencies. We partner with all of the military agencies. We actually have some very good working relationships throughout our community. I will say my office and the law enforcement agencies get along as well as any prosecutor's office in the country. Because you've seen when it breaks down between law enforcement and the prosecutors, it causes problems. One of the ones going back is Boulder. When the Joan Benet case came up, it was pretty obvious there was some real tension there and they weren't able to work together. That's changed. I will say Boulder today is much different. They work very well with their agencies, but we've always had very good working relationships and with all of our partners. We have currently, this is kind of going through again some of the things that we do different. Obviously, just for definition for people in the middle there, district court, that's where we prosecute felony cases. Our office is required to prosecute all felony cases in the state of Colorado. City attorneys and county attorneys and others can't do those type cases. We're required to prosecute state misdemeanors, and we do the county ordinances that parallel the state misdemeanors. If it's a city misdemeanor, we don't deal with those. We prosecute all juvenile crime cases, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony. We also have a juvenile, you see our discovery, we're averaging 30 to 35,000 cases per year. I think last year when we get to that, it's about 33,000 cases we handled last year. We have a number of specialty courts and divisions. In my office, we have our special victims unit. That's the one I talked about. We take a tough stand on the kids' cases. That's our kids' cases and our rape cases or sexual assault cases on adults. We have a priority of having a specialized unit. We've had that actually going back to Barney Ayupa in the DA's office. I'm a very strong advocate for that, and that is our busiest section in the entire office. We have an economic crime unit because we have some very sophisticated economic crimes. Actually, we just won a Supreme Court ruling here in the last 2 days. We busted a guy out on Platte Avenue who was theft receiving and then selling it, I think it was on eBay. When we took him down a few years ago, actually that weekend there were like 2 shoplifts in the entire city. That's how prolific he was with all of our shoplifters out there. They are very organized, and it takes units like that. Felony intake is where people file charges, and I know Commissioner Waller is very familiar with our felony intake unit. Our investigations, we take the cases from the cops. You've heard me say this before. They arrest them last night, but we actually put them away. Our investigators follow up investigation on their cases, but there is some original jurisdiction so that, for instance, if there's public corruption, we are required by law to be the investigators, or voter fraud, which we get I'm sure I'm going to get a whole bunch of cases referred to me after this election because I do every election. We have a victim witness unit. Let's see, there are diversion services I've kind of touched on. Neighborhood Justice Center, that's our mediation team. We're the only DA's office in the state of Colorado where cops can have their cases mediated or neighbors can have their cases mediated, and it's highly successful. And of course, I've bragged a lot on our Veterans Court. I assume everybody here knows about the Veterans Court, so I won't necessarily go back over that. It's the most outstanding in the country, and it's actually recognized as one of the best problem-solving courts in the country where they have people come out here and study it before they set up their own. Some of the new ones, I actually have a human trafficking unit that was started. Shannon Gerhardt was involved starting that. Let's see, Jen Veman was helped start that. Jenny Darby in my office, and Stephanie Redfield. We've probably put through about 35 to 40 people of human trafficking through that. It is one that when you're in prostitution, it's a high recidivism rate. So far from the stats we've been keeping, we've had 2 recidivate, and it was not prostitution, it was some petty offense. We are in the middle of another class right now. We've done 1 session. We have 3 more sessions to go. We have 4 sessions in that. We actually partner very much with the community. We have a doctor who gives free medical care, a dentist who gives free dental care, and some of the women have never had that medical care, never had that dental care. We actually have a tattoo artist that will either hide or remove the tattoos that are put on women to label them as a sex slave. We have housing there. We have childcare there. We help them get a job. We've got different job people. It's just wonderful seeing the whole community. Tessa's there, and so it's been extremely good. I've talked before about our Not One More, so I won't go through that. Here's briefly our office, that you can see our different sections. If you're interested, this is my county court where they handle about 25,000 cases a year. Most of this is my felony district court where we're handling about
If you could,
70,000.
Mr. DA, use the mouse pointer. We can't see your,
You can see the mouse
there
pointer?
you go. Whoop.
Except that took me, okay, if I click on it. This is county court. This is going to be my district court where we handle all the felonies from murder to trespass to whatever it may be. These are my investigators that we have these days. This is the intake unit, handling those 7,000 plus felonies coming in. This is my teller office. It used to be a part-time job. Ever since gaming went in, we do have a full-time staff, but you can see 97% of my budget, 97% of my crime is really down here in El Paso County, and it's the bigger population. Economic crime, this is that specialty unit for kids cases and sexual assault cases. This is our drug court and veterans court, highly successful. Michael Allen's here who heads that up for us in our office. Juvenile prosecution and diversion below that. Restitution, you're going to see I'm going to brag on our restitution later, although the court has a very good restitution program also. That's our mediation unit. You can see my admin is up in that upper corner. So you can tell you we've spent the money in the courts. And actually my team leaders, like you see, Brett Nelson over here is a team leader. He just doesn't manage those people. He's handling, my team leader, that's my homicide team. They're handling the most high-profile cases in our jurisdiction, so everybody's working in our office. Victim witness. Quite frankly, this is an unfunded mandate. Every year, the legislature demands that we put more into victim witness, and they don't give us money for it. That is probably that and the ceiling law get changed more than any other law. Every time they change the law, I've got to throw out all the paperwork we used before. I have to hire new people to comply with what they need. I have to redo the paperwork, which is a cost. I have asked them I pushed CDAC very hard, and it's something that you, for your lobbying, should be aware of, that we did get to the point that we took a vote that we would not support a new victim rights law unless it came with money to the DA's office. Now, unfortunately, that hasn't always, we've sometimes backed down on some of those when they come in front of the legislature, but it is a huge unfunded mandate. I'm all for victim services, but when the state mandates, they also ought to provide things. Victims comp very much is in that same category in terms of what we get from the state. Here's where I was saying you can be proud of your people. I don't know that we've done a press release yet, but Colorado District Attorney's Organization met in Breckenridge a few weeks back. They do select some people for different honors. Margaret Veller was, actually that's not Prosecutor of the Year, she was the Sean May. She was the Sean May, actually the very first recipient of the Sean May Award, which is really I shouldn't say a lifetime, but it's sort of you have to be a very experienced prosecutor, showing great success over time, showing a commitment to law enforcement, to justice, and someone who's extremely committed. Margaret Veller is the first recipient of that out of our office. If you go down that list, you will see quite a few prosecutors of the year recognized by the peers, their peers from across the state of Colorado, and they only name one prosecutor a year. Donna Billick was it in 2018. She's actually a UCCS grad, so I'll plug UCCS there for them too. Kim Kitchen is the first vice president. As an assistant DA, that's the number 2. Every DA's office has a number 2, one assistant. They select each year who will be the first vice president of CDAC. There's only one that's selected. Kim Kitchen was selected by her peers in 2018 for 18 to 19, and she was just selected last month again to be the 19 to 20 by her peers. You can see we have Victim Advocates of the Year. We have an outstanding office. We lead the state of Colorado in a lot of ways. Here's our budget thing. As you can see again, our budget, this was 2018, was $15 million. Interestingly, if you look at Denver, You see stars in misdemeanor traffic. They're the city and county of Denver, so actually all their traffic and misdemeanors go to city court. So they have that $27 million budget now for just those juvenile and felony cases, which is substantially a smaller number than what we're handling in our office. The closest to us is Adams, which if you look, you can see they're kind of the baby in the group in terms of population. But even they have a much higher budget than we do in terms of running an office. Again, we do more felony trials, we handle more cases, we put more people in prison, we put more people in diversion. We have an outstanding unit with less money. The taxpayers can be very proud of what they're getting.
What do you attribute I mean, we have similarly situated populations between us and Denver County. I mean, the metro area is a lot larger, so presumably they have more people visiting that area than we do, yet we have more felony filings than they do. What do you attribute that to?
And actually, I was going to talk about Denver because I find it interesting. If I go back just a few years, I think it's in 2015, I think they had 5,100 felony cases. Then they went to, they've slowly been creeping up. They used to only be around 5,000. And over the last 2 years, they're starting to catch up with us for the first time. They have a higher crime rate. Colorado Springs, Denver has a higher crime rate than Colorado Springs. And our counties have a lower crime rate. Aurora has a higher crime rate than we do. You've heard when I've compared our size that we're bigger than St. Louis, bigger than Miami, bigger than New Orleans, bigger than Pittsburgh, but we have a lower crime rate. What I do have is great law enforcement agencies. I have well-trained, highly educated law enforcement agencies. The example I can give you is the homicide. I'll have someone walk up to me in the street and say, gee, Dan, you had that crime last night, it gives you job security. Well, A, I'll say I don't want that type of job security, but B, I say, no, that gives the police job security. It's their solve rate that gives me job security. They don't solve the case, I don't see it. If I look at homicides, across the country, the average solve rate for homicides is about 2/3, about 66%. Not this past summer, but the summer before I saw the statistics, Chicago was down to 5 to 15% homicide solve rate. So they really were having vigilante justice in the street because their justice system was broken down. I know that they're still having a lot of murders in Chicago this past summer. I didn't see what their solve rate is. My sheriff's office solve rate many years has been 100%. And I would say on average, it's going to be in the 90 percentiles. My Colorado Springs Police Department is not unusual for it to be in the 90 percentiles, but it's going to be in the high 80s. I have some very fine officers who are solving crimes at a higher rate than other communities are, which I think is another reason why we have a lower crime rate than what you're going to see in Denver or Aurora or New Orleans or Miami or some of these other cities. Does that answer your question?
Well, maybe, I think so. So you're saying the solve rate amongst the law enforcement agencies is what accounts for the higher number of felonies. And are these felonies
there's no question,
convictions?
my felony crimes have gone up
Right.
since the reform laws came in, and I've got another series of reform laws coming in now and next year that I'm concerned. So no, there's no question across the state of Colorado, felony filings went up 50% in 5 years after those reforms. But at the same time, I've got a lower crime rate than Denver, a higher solve rate than Denver.
Okay.
And does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think we're getting there. Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Yes, thank you. Kind of listening to the conversation here, maybe I can couch it in a slightly different way because it's maybe just about understanding the statistics that's on the chart. So for Denver, you're saying they have a lower solve rate. So are these numbers under the felony and juvenile that's either convictions or solved numbers, perhaps? I think I heard you say that if it's not solved, you don't see the data, right?
Correct. If they don't solve a burglary last night, I never see the case.
Right. So if Denver's at something like a 60% solve rate, let's say I don't know what it really is, but if it's lower than us, these actual numbers where they have investigators involved in something but they don't solve it, when you take the labor costs for the unsolved and the labor costs for the solved, and you add them together, the number of felony touch points, let's say, might be 10,000 instead of 6,000, because the 6,000 represents the solved. So when you add the solved and unsolved together, that might end up representing why they have such a big budget. Am I accurate in what I'm saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, it could account for cases they may not be filing because they choose not to. It could also account what they put into their diversion. I'm confident I have more people in diversion, though, than anybody in the state. So I know that's not the difference in the numbers. It can be, and I don't know this for a fact. Well, actually, you've seen it in Seattle. The prosecutor in Seattle has made a decision not to file what do they call their crimes. It's quality of life crimes, so that they're not going to do it's trespassing to sleep in certain areas. There are certain crimes that their homeless are doing that the prosecutor said, I will not file those charges. And of course, the property crime rate just skyrocketed after they did that. So sometimes a DA can make a decision, I'm not going to prosecute certain crimes based on race. That's what Milwaukee did, and their crime rate skyrocketed based on these quality of life crimes that they're calling them. Some of the things you're seeing out of Chicago, quite frankly, some of the people George Soros is putting in the DAs making decisions, I will not do these type crimes. That could account for it, but I don't know that Beth McCann is not prosecuting certain crimes. Denver, they did decide not to emphasize psilocybin mushrooms. I got to think that that's going to have an effect on their community when people know they can go there with their psilocybin mushrooms. But yes, the simple thing is exactly what you said, Commissioner Vanderwerf, in terms of what we've got there. I think that's it. Any other questions on that? This is the 10 county you asked us to produce. You can see certainly of the major counties, we are the lowest, but we are third lowest at this point. Weld is a little bit below us, a smaller county, and so is Boulder. Study, I see you guys looking at it. Do you want to study on that for a second? We get this from your department provides us the numbers for this.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It just might be a reflection of making sure that we have updated statistics, but I have heard from some of our community partners that the El Paso County population for 2019 is like 730,000. So
that's my understanding too, but we get these numbers from the county.
Oh, okay, these are their numbers from the county?
Who do we get that from? Some spot, I guess they do this at, but I agree with you. I think our population's greater than that. We've grown more.
Okay, so these are
half of whatever the 10 county is, so that we're uniform.
It sounds like these are self-reported numbers from the counties in the 10 county survey. Thank you.
And that's shaking your head. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Self-reported. This is, again, I told you we had last year 33,493 cases. Talked about some of the reasons for that. Restitution, actually, we partner with the courthouse. And the courthouse, I will give them kudos, has a great restitution team to where that's the amount collected. We're number one in the state of Colorado, not only in getting court orders for restitution, which really is coming through our office, but then collecting restitution and the percentage collected. I forget what the percentage is, but we have a high, it's 40% of our restitution asked for is collected, almost 50%. Nobody in the state's doing that kind of collection rate, either by percentage or by absolute numbers. And I will say we've got a hardworking team in our office. Restitution is one of the areas I think we were looking at because numbers. Victims' comp, again, is something that we lead the state in. We just got they audit you. We don't get a certificate like the jail does, but in meeting with the people who audit us, they said we have an outstanding victims' comp program that they like to show ours off to the rest of the state of how to do it, how it's best done. Any questions about victims' comp? I don't know if you're familiar with that. Unfortunately, in 2018, we had some record numbers, 51 homicides. If you saw CSPD was talking about, they had a record number of homicides. They had a record number of pedestrians hit by vehicles, and of course, we get those cases. EPSO, I think, was talking about a record number of homicides. Woodland Park, quite frankly, record number of homicides. Well, they all funnel into one point. So we had a tremendous number of homicides in 2018. Those take 1 to 2 years, sometimes longer, to work through the courts. So when that happens last year, we get in trial this year. Just in the last 3 weeks, we've had 3 homicide trials. Anticipating another homicide trial next week and another one the week after that. And those are extremely intense type cases. To date, we're way down. We're 20 homicides to date, which is more along our normal norm of what we would expect in our community. Last year, we took 14 of the homicide cases to trial. To date, we're at 8. They're all kind of pushing into the end of the year here, is what happened is they all got continued in court later on.
I think, can I stop you for a second here?
yeah.
Commissioner Bremer has a question for you.
Thank you. Are these numbers referencing just El Paso County or 4th Judicial District?
That's the 4th Judicial District.
Okay,
Right.
thanks.
For instance, I've got one homicide in 2018 in Woodland Park.
Okay,
I think that was their first one in like 20 years. And actually,
right.
I did the trial on that one 20 years ago. And I'm also assigned on the current case.
thank you.
Any other questions? But that'll be Fountain, that'll be all the law enforcement jurisdictions. I will say if we have a military personnel who does a murder, we will talk with the base to see if they want to take the case or we want to take the case. We do not allow the defense in on that. We figure that's totally a prosecution decision. Now, some of my bases don't really have the capability to have a trial team take the cases. But if it's a Fort Carson soldier, they quite often do have the capability. Although at times when they've been sent overseas, they also take their judicial team with them, and so we've had to take cases when they've been deployed. But a lot of times when a soldier does the crime, it may be that Fort Carson will prosecute it rather than us. Felony cases tried. Most of the major jurisdictions are going to do about 100 felony cases. You can see we are doing 230. The number of days in trials that takes. We're up to 156. It used to be our office felt at 100 that was a lot, but I'll say for most of the time that I've been DA, we're consistently over 200 felony trials a year. Quite frankly, if your people are just plea bargaining everything, we're not getting justice. If we're not willing to go to court and say we're taking a stand on this, then it makes our plea bargains better at the same time. And so we really teach that to our people that they need to identify the right cases to take to trial, set a tone on that, and plea bargain the appropriate cases. This is just talking, again, the felony filings. This was something I gave you last year. Actually, I've got the increase. Part of it is each time you put a new cop out on the street, I get more crime solved. It's good for our community, but it does overwhelm my office. I thought I'd highlight, with a little smile on my face, this was the op-ed you can see from the Gazette for October 9th. It was really talking about the city budget, the one John Suthers was proposing. I highlighted the opening line there for you. Local government provides nothing more important than public safety. Now, I know I'm talking to the choir here on that one. I know that every one of you up there feels the same way, that the purpose of government is public safety, whether that's at the federal level, whether it's at the state level, whether it's at the county level. So I know I'm preaching to the choir, but it also lines up with why I've got certain priorities. If you look down there further, you'll see this section down here. What they're anticipating, if you see it reads the hiring of 20 new officers with the increase of $4.4 million and 8 firefighters. Suthers promised he would add at least 120 sworn law enforcement officers and 32 firefighters before completing his second term in office in 2022. With this budget, he will be well on his way in 2020 with 93 new officers. It has a huge impact on my office. Obviously, our 1A that our own sheriff got, same thing. When he's able to put more people on the street, I get more cases. This was the 2019 DA budget. And that includes our grants. We're pretty active in seeking grants, whether it's gaming grants, victim, get a lot of grants. Here's our critical needs. Now I've divided this up. Most of my critical needs are around the 2 new courtrooms. And there's a reason they gave us 2 new courtrooms. The state doesn't want to pay for judges and everything else unless they have to. And quite frankly, we tend to be the stepsister to Denver when they give out those. And we clearly qualified for new judges because of the numbers, which is driven by our criminal cases. We got our first division in 19 and our second in 20. These are really the needs of my office.
Can I go back to that last slide for just a second?
Gotcha.
What of the 2 new judges that were being added, what portion of their dockets will be criminal?
They're running 50-50 is what they do on their dockets. So every judge they either have domestic, which is your divorce cases, civil, and criminal. And then you have one that does juvenile, but generally that's the three. And they do some combination, so they'll do half their docket with criminal and half with civil, or half with domestic and half with civil, or half with domestic and half with criminal. My two new judges both are going to be criminal, half.
Okay,
Because
thank
that's
you.
where the numbers have been the increase. Not to say, if you talk to our civil bar, they're pretty frustrated how long it takes to get a civil case through over there too.
If you wouldn't mind, Commissioner Brimmer is asking if you'd please step a little closer to the microphone. Yeah, thank
betcha.
you.
These are our critical needs going forward. And then I know you have a proposed, which you put down there as 700,000, and you can see the shortfall that we have on what we've put forward. This is actually the plan. If you remember, we put together a 2-year plan last year. And so some of them, like I hired, the first division came on board July 1. So we hired attorneys July 1. So when you see those 2 deputy DAs at the top, you put in the budget for 19 only a half year of those 2 attorneys that are manning that courtroom. So next year you've got to have the funds for the entire year. So that 64,000 reflects the extra 6 months so that we can keep them in the courtroom and take them up to the full 1-year budget. So a lot of what you're seeing at the top are people that we hired this year. We hired some in July, we hired some in October, and that was based on the timeline that the commissioners voted on. We knew the second courtroom was supposed to come in July 1. The legislature tricked us on that, and they're starting them January 1. So January 1, I need to man those courtrooms. And so sort of that's a lot of what you're seeing in the middle section. I have discussed all of these until we get down to the last 4. So last year I went pretty in depth on every one of these. I'm not sure I need to go back in depth on why everyone in position is. And I will say that every one of them down to the administrative assistant investigations, you had put into the 2-year or 5-year plan, but the 2-year plan, and many of them going down to the investigator there at the top are already on board. Is that right? And so I'll spend my time talking about, but I can go back if you want on the others, looking at the administrative on down and why it is we have some needs there. Actually, I'm going to start with this slide. I showed this to Bill Elder the other day, and he was shocked. I probably should have started by asking, how many body cams do you think we get every year? And one of my people in my office said, well, I guess if you have 33,000 cases, you have 70,000 body cams. Sounded like a pretty good number. Anybody want to give a guess? Lenius, you're shaking your head.
It sounded reasonable.
Sounds reasonable.
Cops per location.
If you look on this, you'll see the blue line was the number of body cams I got per month from the sheriff's office. The red line is where we went to in 2018 per month. If you see the green line, that's what I'm getting this year. We're averaging about 7,000 body cams a month from just the sheriff's office. That's what I'm getting from the Colorado Springs Police Department. Again, the red was what they did in 2017, the purple in 18, and you can see, I guess there in August, we had almost 37,000 body cams given to our office on these cases. What happens is as an officer goes particularly into a hot situation, if you will, a domestic violence that's ongoing, or even a traffic stop, they're turning on their body cams. If I got 3 officers there, all 3 are turning on their body cams, and they do give kind of different evidence from their different perspectives. If I have 5 or 6 officers there, I've got even more body cams. Obviously, if you have an officer-involved shooting, they hit a lot of body cams. And it is overwhelmed my data entry people. I have to get that out in discovery. If I don't get it out, our cases get dismissed. Now, the police agencies have set up some nice systems, but even they were shocked to see these numbers. They didn't realize how much there are secondary costs to body cams, which I've talked about actually for a couple of years when Sheriff Elder and then Pete Carey, the chief of police, and Chris Heber down in Fountain, or all of them were putting in body cams. I was talking to you that this is going to overwhelm my office in certain ways. Actually, a lot of the debate was who has to do the storage. There's a lot of storage to body cams. So that's why you see in our request is some body cam people going in the future. Whether I put that money towards that this year or future years, it's definitely a need, and it's pretty overwhelming in our office. So that's where you see on the newer critical needs are 2 body-worn camera clerks because of how overwhelmed they are with body cams. And I don't expect that to go down.
Can I stop you for just a second? Commissioner Vanderwerf?
Yes, thank you. So you gave the data there for El Paso County and Colorado Springs, but as I recall from a previous chart, you're getting case referrals from 22 law enforcement agencies. How many of them also have body cams? I'm sure those are smaller organizations, but how many of them have body cameras or are on their way to becoming body cameras? And the real question is, we see the load you have here on these 2 charts, but is there a lot more coming?
You see these 2 because Colorado Springs Police Department is over 70% of my felony business. Sheriff's Office is probably about 15%, so right there I've got about 80% of my entire business from those 2. If I include the traffic misdemeanor, actually the State Patrol comes up, and so the Colorado Springs Police Department goes down into the 60 percentiles when I include misdemeanors and traffic, and that's because State Patrol comes up to about 15% of my overall in the traffic misdemeanor area, along with the Sheriff's Office. They're about equal to them. So I'm really driven by those major agencies, but Fountain has them. I've had different agencies experiment, and you're going to test me off the top of my head. We had a lot of errors early on, so we started having meetings in our office to bring agencies together of what policies they needed, what equipment they needed if they're going to go to it. I had one simple one where they had their processor was a little thing about this size on the floor, and one of the officers, because it was on the floor, kicked it and destroyed all the body cams, and so I'm getting motions for destruction of evidence. So we had to have lessons on what equipment, how to treat your equipment, how to get the body cams over, but Fountains had them. At times, Teller County's had them. I know that Monument has had them. So a lot of my smaller agencies have them. I will say it's a little more automated with the bigger offices because they can afford that. It's a lot more hand-to-hand with the smaller offices, which actually makes it harder work.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Yes, so my question is, don't each of the municipalities, the Sheriff's Office, the Colorado Springs Police, Fountain Police, have their own people, clerks that handle the body cam
Yeah,
footage?
but they've got to get them over to us. So then we get it out in discovery, and we monitor the discovery on that.
I'm just wondering, if that's a duplication, I don't understand why their clerks are doing a certain amount of work, and then you would have the same clerk, or different clerks doing.
This is going to be a guesstimate, and ask like CSPD, but if I'm getting 30,000 from them, they're probably getting 100,000. And so they're going to turn on their body cam when they're doing a lot of things, and they have some retention policies. So if no crime comes out of it, they've met a citizen, turns out it's nothing, I think they get rid of it in like 30 to 60 days. Probably their civil attorney sets something up for how long they retain it in case a lawsuit comes out of whatever they did, but it wasn't a crime. Then they've got the unsolved crime. So they've got a lot of body cams they have to deal with and how to dispose of them, keep them, all of that for their system. But once it's sent to my office, I'm the one who's in charge of getting it out in discovery, making sure we comply with their deadlines of what they send to us. So they have a legitimate reason for having their own group, and I have to have my own group. Sort of like, yes, they have investigators who investigate the case, but my investigators have to take it and make it trial worthy, if that makes sense. And yes, I'd love to have them do more of that. I'd love to have them hire more body cam people and do the work for me. But quite frankly, that is one of the debates we have is who does more of the work sometimes. Is it Bill Elder's office or mine? The legal assistant, again, that's actually administrative assistant for my investigations. I've got a lot of my investigators now, rather than doing investigations, doing administrative work, that we could be much more functional and at a cheaper cost to have an administrative assistant do it rather than an investigator doing that. So those are the 3 primary people area. You know, we have the public trustee space. The public trustee is still in there, and it keeps getting backed up. I know sooner or later that's going to be given to us. It was originally made for probate, I think. Has even a little courtroom in there for the probate court that is not functional for DA's office. I think probate had maybe 6, 7, 8 employees. We're hoping to put how many employees in there? 17 employees. in the space they had. It's really not functional. So one of the requests we have, and I know Amy's very much looking at all the facilities and prioritizing facilities. We're hoping to get on her radar. We're on her radar, and I know she has the difficulty of trying to prioritize across the county. That's what we're hoping to develop it into, and we actually think it would be perfect for our SVU unit. That's that sex offender and child abuse unit. And it has its own entry, which has benefits and things like that. This is the estimate the county got for us for building that out. $576,000. It may be that in the bidding process we might get that down somewhat, but that's what the county's put out there right now. When the public trustee moves out, we will move in. It just won't be very functional, and I'll probably have a different unit until the money can be gotten someday. Quite frankly, that's going to be a lower priority for me right now because I've got to man those courts and I've got to have the prosecutors in place. The last issue, and then I'll open it up to any further questions. I was going to go through some of the things that we're seeing, and I think that you ought to be aware of as commissioners because we're going to be seeing this going forward. I mentioned to you there's a lot of laws that they're passing to get people out of prison, and you need to be aware of that. I think we ought to have truth in sentencing. We haven't had truth in sentencing in probably 20 years in Colorado. It was pretty routine that we knew that on a property crime, if somebody got a 10-year sentence, that really meant 2.5 years. On that 2.5 years, you're eligible for ComCore or a halfway house in our community after you've served about 20 to 24 months. So if you get a 2.5-year sentence, you'll serve 6 months, a 10-year sentence, you'll serve 6 months in prison. You'll go out to our community corrections because now you're eligible for that within 2 years of your out date. To serve the remaining 20 months, but ComCore only holds people in residential 180 days. So you'll do, on a 10-year sentence, 6 months in prison, 6 months at ComCore, and then you're back in your home to serve out the rest of your ComCore sentence at your home. That's what I've got right now. I just had a case where a judge called me trying to figure out what happened on a case he just sentenced in the last 1.5 years, I think. It was a second-degree assault, which is a violent offense. He gave 10 years consecutive to the person's sentence that they were on for parole. They were out on parole, did a second-degree assault. Judge gave him 10 years and made it consecutive. They were out in 1 year. And I can give you that case if you want it. We've called DOC saying, how is this possible? Because on a violent crime, they're supposed to serve 75% of their time. They don't get as much good time on a property crime. We now have a law that says when you have a consecutive sentence, DOC is to run them together as if it's one sentence. So DOC is, since it's one sentence, is giving them all the credits they've earned on the first sentence they're on parole for, and they get good time while they're on parole, credited to their new sentence because it's a single sentence. So the DOC person actually told my attorney, well, the judge should have known by making it consecutive, it would make it a shorter sentence than if they'd made it concurrent. Had they made it concurrent, that person would be in prison right now. Instead, they gave them the credits on their previous crime to the new crime, and they're out in the street in 1 year on a 10-year sentence, and the judge was flabbergasted. So I'm having to warn my attorneys about that they need to really do a calculation when we ask for a consecutive sentence. Are we going to be reducing their sentence? The DAs did a study last year because we are concerned with the bond reforms, the parole reforms, which I have another parole reform this year that's came on board. With the and probation being overwhelmed, that we're seeing more and more crimes that are being committed by people while they're under supervision of the courts, either on bond, on parole, at ComCore, or on probation. So we took 1 week in September of last year and asked every DA's office in the state for all of your felony filings, how many were on one of those 4 things. We were 49% here in El Paso County. We were 40% in Teller County. The state average was right there at 50%. We're either on bond, on parole, on probation, or at ComCore. We had 2 people that were on 2 of those things at the same time when they committed it. If I go back 10 years, that's 25% rate, because one of the DAs went back to look back, and it was 25% rate. So that's having an impact on us. My prison population, I told you, has gone down, but they passed a law this year that says if you're within so much percentage of over full, you have to put people out on the streets for some of our lower level felonies. Well, quite frankly, you earn your way into prison. There aren't many really lower level felonies in prison if a judge is willing to put you there. And so it mandates certain people be put out on the streets. We are not a bigger population. If you go back 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, our population of prisoners has gone down in Colorado. We have closed prisons. So that's why it looks overcrowded. And you need to know that when they start talking about overcrowding. We don't have more prisoners in prison in Colorado. We have less. And that law now is going to put more people back out on the street. I will point out, 2016 was the last numbers I actually did the statistics on. Across the state of Colorado, there were 46,000 cases filed as felonies. It was actually like 46,053 or something. There were 5,984, or I'll round that to 6,000 because that's 16 people, that went to prison out of that. That's 13% of our felons go to prison. So I think the DAs, that's always come up, DAs just want to lock everybody up and put them away. No, we take a lot of felons and put them in diversion, or put them in ComCore or halfway houses, put them on probation, put them through problem-solving courts. In fact, 87% of the cases we resolve as a group across the state of Colorado with something that we think is justice in the case, gets the appropriate accountability, and hopefully gets rehabilitation and moves on. So I don't think, that's another thing, you've got this mantra that DAs want to lock everybody up, and it's just not true, and the numbers don't show that either. I do expect this year I'm going to have more sentencing reform laws. I'm actually going to get charge reform. It's been on the docket for a couple of years now to have felony murder reduced in its penalty and make the elements such that it's almost impossible to charge. I expect that'll come up again this year. I expect we're going to have another bond reform law is what they're talking about this year. We're expecting, and I'm in discussions with Bill Elder and CDAC, with California changing their officer-involved shooting laws that we're expecting. We're going to see a law on that that'll be proposed this year, making it more difficult to be, quite frankly, a lot of times to be a police officer. We know that's been the trend across this country. We have a very supportive group here, but I can see my officer-involved shootings are up over the last few years. It's a different society. If you ask Bill Elder, his guards are getting beat up more routinely in his jail. It's gone way up over the last couple of years. And again, I think it's a reflection of where our society is right now and how they respect authority. But I'm expecting more reforms in those areas. I talked about the good time issues. I'm expecting that they keep looking at other ways to get people out of prison and put them back on the streets, which will affect our crime rate. You've seen the positions. I will say that I've seen the budget. I know it's a compromise. There are actually some positions that we had in the 2-year plan that I'm not going to be able to fill with the 700,000. But I know the realities of a budget also. It's a give and take. You've got other priorities that you have to look at. We've met with Ms. Folsom several times as a group. Some of those were pretty matter-of-fact discussions, but she's come up with a plan that I can support to let you know that. It's not everything I'd like, but it moves me in the right direction. From that, we can pick some priorities of what we need to. I know I need to man those courtrooms. I won't be able to get all those positions. I certainly can't do that space. There's no way I'm ever going to be able to do a $500,000 build out of what you're giving me going forward. Certainly, our human capital always has to be looked at. I know you got that 27th check this year, which makes it difficult to give an ongoing. At one time, isn't as good for, quite frankly, the employees of El Paso County because it doesn't go into their base pay. It is a one-time. I know that some of that solving is trying to do the 1.5%. Quite frankly, my office wouldn't be able to, the 700,000, we need the personnel to man those courtrooms as our priority will be. And so I know that that's the way budgets go. I've seen the same thing in the city, quite frankly. When John Southers wanted to immediately do some police officers, he had to delay it a year. He knew the need was there. We have great needs. I hope you understand that. I hope there's nobody who doesn't think we're not working hard. But I know also that you've got to balance the other needs of the county. And so this is something we can support, our office, as we've talked as a group.
Do we have any questions for the DA? Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, congratulations on one of the charts you showed, all the awards. It's obvious you've got a hardworking team and they're doing a fantastic job. And it's a tough job, I think. with some of the legislation that seems to be coming down, it looks like it's on good, bad, or indifferent going to get tougher. It's sometimes I think a bit of a challenge if we have a very effective law enforcement agency and then we get hamstrung about actually completing the process for incarceration, where incarceration is appropriate. That's just I guess unfortunate. One of the things I have asked others that have come before us regarding the budget was unfunded mandates. You have alluded to some of that right now, but I am very interested in making sure I have the best understanding that I can have, at least, regarding what we see as current unfunded mandates that are challenging our offices, and maybe others that are coming forward. And that's at least in part because when Governor Polis came to see us about a month ago, and not all of us commissioners had the opportunity to be there, but 3 of us were there, he made an offer whenever we see unfunded mandates to make sure that we present that to him so that he knows what they are and we have our best estimate about what that would be, so that the hope would be that he would maybe do something about it, but if not that, at least he would be aware of it and maybe help to shape it a little bit, because those unfunded mandates are potentially very devastating for us. And we faced a lot of that last year, and I think more is coming, and you've alluded to some of that as well. One other comment I'd like to make, this may be on Brian Olson's list, our facilities guy, but with regard to that $500,000 budget requirement for the public trustee legal office there, I'm just hoping that it's on his list of unfunded priorities, and if it is, that's great, but if it isn't, then we should.
Folsom shaking her head,
it looks
yes.
like it is. Okay, great. So that's excellent. So that means that it will be given an opportunity to compete with the other unfunded mandates that we have regarding facilities. And I think that's a very healthy process. And it sounds like a no kidding real requirement you got there. So thanks.
Yeah, and I know Ms. Folsom gets to take on the responsibility of balancing those. I know an elevator is a big issue right down the courthouse that she's looking at to keep those going. We have 2 elevators. One of mine was down for about 8+ weeks, which, we have people trying to, most of my attorneys are on the 5th and 6th floor, so it makes it difficult to get to court, but I know she gets to balance that. On your unfunded mandates, I think I was real good last year about coming to you a couple times.
You were.
About some unfunded mandates to put the specific bills up and votes and try to get CCI involved. The second time I came with Bill Elder, and he emphasized some of the same laws I did. We differed a little bit on the drug law. I think but he saw that as probably the biggest unfunded mandate. We now have 4 grams or less of a drug is now a misdemeanor, and that doesn't matter if it's heroin or any other type drug. I think they exempted one, which is the date rape drug. That's a huge impact, because 4 grams of heroin is 40 hits for a user. That's a distributor's amount, and now they're going to be treated as a possessor. And instead of going to prison because it's under that, it will fill up our jails. It has a greater effect, though, and I guess the trend you're going to see, that law doesn't come into effect until March. I've asked Jeff Lindsay of my office to put together a group of citizens, courthouse, police, how we're going to handle this. Our drug court right now, for instance, only takes felons. Well, all those possessors in drug court aren't going to qualify because now they're going to be misdemeanors. By the way, they said they want to go to a treatment model. Guess what happened this year? They have cut the funding to drug courts across the state of Colorado. At the same time, they've turned this into a misdemeanor. So I've lost treatment dollars. I brought it up to Shane Sandridge. Saw him just this past weekend and said, Shane, are you aware that they have cut the funding to the drug courts, not just mine, but across the state? I know you are looking for rehabilitation. Will you look into that for me? He said he would look into that. But the other thing they've done is on certain misdemeanors now, they are not allowed to book you into jail. They have to give you a summons and complaint. Should you skip court, then they're allowed to arrest you on a failure to appear, but the judge can't hold you more than overnight and has to give you a PR bond the next day. So what is my local law enforcement agency doing in response to that? If they stop a person who's failed to appear in court right now, they're not even taking him down to Bill Elder's jail to book them in. At their squad car, they're giving him a summons for the next date to show up, then because you missed the last date, here's your new date, here's a summons. So they're keeping them long enough at their car, having a conversation with them to fill out the summons and give it to them. What do you think the odds are that they're going to show back up to court the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time? And guess what? That law doesn't say the fourth time, now you get to arrest them. No, it's the same law. They have to, at most you can stay overnight, and the judge has to let you out the next day. That'll overwhelm Bill Elder, and that's why my local law enforcement has set up this summons thing. That is already happening now. When our drug laws come in as misdemeanors in March, what's going to happen? The cop's going to walk down, what's our park there along the river? The Monument Valley Park. They're going to see a guy shooting up, because quite frankly, when I used to jog there, I'd see that. They're going to see somebody shooting up. It's going to be less than the 4 grams. They're going to go over and have to give them a ticket. They can take away the evidence, that needle right then and the drugs right on them. And if they come back an hour later and that person's still sitting there shooting up, all they can do is give them a second ticket, take away the needle, take away the drugs, can never book them into jail. And then if they fail to show up in court, they're going to run into a cop on the homeless team who's going to say, oh, here's another summons, please come to this court date, because we're not allowed to arrest them. By the way, if you know, Bill Elder doesn't have misdemeanors in his jail. I know I think the public needs to know that. The only
Talked about it earlier today.
Oh, you heard that? Yeah, the only ones were FTAs, but they're not doing those anymore. Domestic violence or people sentenced. It's all felons. We put together a program. We worked for 2 years putting together a program with agencies in our community and the sheriff's office and my office for those who had mental illness issues that could be treated through drugs. That if they got booked into the jail, it takes up to 30 days to stabilize. We weren't allowed to know what they was, but we knew they were stable. And Aspen Point would help out, and we deliver them to places that would actually make sure they got their drugs, maybe give them housing, and on the low level misdemeanors and felonies, so that they could be treated in the community, not in Bill's jail. As far as I know today, we haven't had a single person qualify. There are not low level misdemeanors and felons in there. These are high felons that have a reason that they're in those jails, and I think the community needs to know that. So I thought you ought to know about the arrest and the summons. One of the unfunded mandates was our bond law that they've been proposing. I think they're going to propose it again. If they do it, interestingly, when they built it last year, that did not get through. If you had a bond services committee like we do, then you had to fund the state mandate. If you didn't have a bond services, the state would pay for it. So actually, at one point, I turned to you and said, maybe you should get rid of that unit and let the state pick it up. Because if you have one, they're going to mandate, the last year's bill would mandate a certain number of people, how many you had to have, and it would have cost our county a whole bunch of money by the state mandate without giving you money if you already had at least one person doing that in your county. Does that make sense? I expect that one's going to come back.
Well, I just want to echo some of Commissioner Vanderwerf's comments on the unfunded mandates. That's been a huge problem for us over the last several years, and I can't say thank you enough for all of the time in your 11 years as the district attorney. I really appreciate all the time you've spent in the state house in that highly charged political environment advocating for good policy for the citizens of El Paso County and the citizens of the state of Colorado. And no doubt that you're going to be there again as they push all of these unfunded mandates forward for the 2020 general session as well. It's absolutely crucial to have folks like you that are willing to go down to the state house, toss some elbows to really fight for good public policy. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
We've also made it a priority of some of our people. Andy Vaughn went up and testified quite a few times last year. Sam Burney did a terrific job and helped shape some of the laws.
And I'd like to echo Commissioner Waller's point about your going up to Denver and testifying so many times. And this decriminalization of drugs law, it's very, very unfortunate, I think, because as I'm aware, as you've explained to me before, it's going to reduce the incentives to go to alternative courts, which is really about rehab. And that's the rehabilitation, getting into drug treatment that can get people off these addictions. I think that process is going to be, perhaps already is getting harmed as a result of that law. And I will make the other point, if, sometimes someone that's shooting up in a park the best thing that can happen to them is to be arrested and get into jail where maybe their life gets saved as a result of doing that. So I just think we've got some really unfortunate secondary consequences coming out of these laws that are just not good.
I'll give a plug to the Gazette. They've actually had a series going on for a while now on both mental health and drug issues in our community, and they pointed out we really do not have treatment facilities for either. And so, yes, unfortunately, the only way you really got into treatment is if you got arrested. Now that we're not going to have people going into our felony courts, even that treatment model's gone. So I applaud the Gazette for really trying to bring this out into the open of the lack of treatment we have. Our decriminalization started at about 2010. We had the wobbler come in 2013, and now this year we've got the misdemeanor. Those all have huge impacts, and each time carry with them a rise in my crime rate.
Okay, we're about 20 minutes over here, but Commissioner Brimmer has one last question.
But I have a relevant question. Thank you. So, pardon the newbie question here, but so with that $700,000, you're basically going to fund those 3 critical positions you outlined to us in detail, and then with the other, don't do math on the dais, 500,000 plus, you'll kind of prioritize that throughout the year or space them back by 6 months. Am I understanding that correctly?
And let me pull out my sheet here. Actually, I've got the mini. Do you have the large?
Or do a portion of the build out?
Brought a mini version up here for me, but as I said, if you look at the people at the top of the critical needs, they're already hired. I'm not going to fire anybody. So I've got to continue them on. So like the 2 deputy DAs at the top at $64,000, I've hired them. I'm not going to fire them. So anybody who's listening to my office, you are a critical need. You are going to remain. And so when you look at the, it's actually, I think, down to through investigator there at the top. Yep. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 positions. Those people are already hired. And so our number one priority will be to maintain their positions going forward. The next few positions are what we're looking at for manning the courts. Quite frankly, as I get down to, I really need body-worn people. I really need the administrative investigator, but I got to man those courts first. So there's a high likelihood I'm not going to be able to hire those. And we'll just have to figure out how to get it done, which is sort of what we're doing now. I have to have attorneys in the courtroom, so you're going to see the 2 deputy DAs. I have a feeling, we'll sit down and finalize our prioritizations, but that's where we're heading. I'm going to have to make a choice. You see 3 major crime type people there. The senior deputy DA leads a team. We put together with 2 courtrooms, that's a team. If I don't hire that, they'll be leaderless, but I may have to do that. Second, that's my homicide team. So when you see those 51 homicides, when we're taking on the highest profile cases in the country sometimes, that's those attorneys who are very experienced, very trained, very professional. I may have to do without that. So I have to say, okay, maybe I haven't got the attorney to cover the murders this year. That was on the 2-year plan, but I understand, as I said before, we have to balance things out. Or I may have to not do the SVU. That's a critical attorney I need that's doing the kids' cases, sexual assault cases. They're highly time consuming. We do more of those trials than anybody. It is the busiest part of my office. I actually give a little bonus pay to be in there because everybody recognizes they're the hardest working attorneys in the entire office. And so part of that is to reward them for that. And I don't have pushback from the other attorneys because they understand that's a hard working office. And the economic crime, we've had you can see the scams from your phones that you get on up. And I told you it's very organized anymore. That one guy we busted on Platte, how it just shut down shoplifting across the community. It's not unusual this morning that your thief got up this morning, went to, I probably shouldn't say a retail store, stole some items out of that store, took it to another store of the same type, and returned the property to that store and got the card with the money on it for the return. Then they went to my fence. Actually what happens is they probably did their drugs the night before, so they're getting up at 10, 11 in the morning. Quite frankly, this is the cycle. They're shoplifting at 10, 11. They're returning it just after noon. By the afternoon, they're selling it to the theft receiver, who's then selling the merchandise on eBay or other ways. It isn't, eBay's monitor is pretty good anymore, but there's a lot of ways you can do that. electronically. From that money, they're going back to the drug house that night. Used to be they got 50 cents on the dollar. Now they're closer to 70, 80 cents on the dollar that they get from that, and that's the cycle I get. But when I bust that one economic crime person, I'm probably going to only get one out of those three at best. And so I'm going to have to make some decisions of which one of those do I really need in the office and which two are going to have to. And that's why these are needs of us, and so it is future needs. That's why they were on the list. That's why if you go down to administrative assistant there at 60,000, that was a group that had been approved on the long-term plan, but I'm not going to be able to afford at least two of those positions.
Thank you.
Probably
Sorry, I
the legal
didn't mean
assistant.
for you to have to go into the nitty-gritty on that. What I really wanted to know
I think
was
the community ought to know what we have to balance.
was
but
that you'll
same
have
thing
the
fire department
discretion
has
to
do
use
and the police
those
department.
as you see fit. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is HR here and ready to go? Oh, there you are. You were below my sight line.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrea McGee with Human Resources and Risk Management. And here we go. When I heard the DA speak about when he started out, and I thought, well, I need to say that too. I have 24 FTEs, and it is an outstanding team. So I want to start out with that as well. We have 2 managers, 2 business partners, 2 employee relations specialists, 1 HR team lead, 7 HR coordinator, 1 HR technician. The HR coordinators, technician, and team lead, their primary function are interview facilitation. The 2 compensation and HRS specialists conduct compensation studies and prepare job descriptions. Our HRM data specialist, he processes and audits all payroll change request forms. 1 training organizational development specialist, 1 risk management coordinator that assists with workers' compensation, physicals, and also conducts AP functions, 1 safety specialist, 1 claims adjuster. This is the individual that deals with mailboxes during snowstorms, and 1 HRM admin coordinator that is the face of my department. This is a brief overview of my department, the recruitment, hiring process, the various HR services that we provide, employee relations, unemployment, and compensation. These are some of the statistics. As you can see, I don't want to bring up 2016 and 17, so I'm going to compare 2018 with 2019 as of September 27th. By looking at our numbers, you can see that we are set to surpass our interview facilitation by 20%. Our new employee onboarding averages by approximately 15%. Our background checks since 2018 include election judges. In 2018, the election judges were 598, and in 2019, 149. As you can see, in 2019, we posted, as of September 27, a total of 445 jobs. 244 of these jobs were posted at a variety of external websites, actually 40 different websites, which brings up a total of 1,027 job postings, in addition to the 445. Our main focus on going to specialized websites are trades and labor and professional positions such as IT and engineering. We also attended 11 job fairs this year in comparison to 7 in 2018. Our training and organizational development We provide leadership development program, development training classes, new supervisor manager training, mandated training, for example, the harassment training, performance management system, and the internship program. Our training statistics, we have centralized all the training requests, which allowed us to expand the number of trainings within the county, which of course is a cost savings. We can identify the needs and offer a variety of training to all of El Paso County. We have also expanded El Paso County's internship program to include trades and labor positions. In this year, in 2019, we successfully placed 2 trades and labor interns. As of today, 95 managers and supervisors completed the leadership development program. 53 employees are currently in our 3rd program, which consists of 11 classes. Based upon feedback, we continue to adjust classes into either part-time classes or full-time and added additional classes. Our leadership development program will prepare our employees for the success in their leadership positions. The goal is to be proactive with the program and offer it to future leaders as identified by their leadership team. Our risk management operations, workers' compensation, property liability claims, the countywide safety program, CDL program, pre-employment screening, motor vehicle record monitoring. In 2019, we started the random drug testing for the sheriff's office. We also provide the employee immunization program for the health department. And of course, we have the countywide insurance. Some of the risk management statistics. During election cycle, of course, the MVR number is significantly increased, as you can see. We also brought in ergonomic evaluations in-house. Our safety specialist conducts all ergonomic evaluations, which leads to a savings for my department and, of course, El Paso County. The mandated state statutes, FLSA, the Equal Employment Opportunity, Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, Colorado Workers' Compensation Act, CDL, Employment Eligibility Verification, the House Bill 181128, the Equal Pay Act, which will go into effect 2021, Veterans Preference, and the Fair Credit Reporting Act are all mandates that my department must follow. Our strategic plan goal is to maintain and promote a financially sustainable county government that is transparent and effective. Some of the highlights in my department that we are very proud of, the training program, of course, to include USERA, reasonable suspicion, the citizen video recording, training to county staff. We hosted 2 job fairs for El Paso County exclusively. We had at the Citizen Service Center approximately 80 attendees, and during the job fair at the Department of Public Works, we had a total of 257 attendees. We revised our interview process for the Department of Human Services and added group interviews, which assists with the filling of caseworker vacancies. We also revised the county safety program. We completed the El Paso County Safety Manual. We established a countywide safety committee, assumed the existing county AED program by adding 20 additional AEDs, and maintained the 57 countywide AEDs. And of course, we developed our internal ergonomic evaluation program. One area that we are very proud of in my department, my risk management group recovered a total of $212,187 by subrogating various areas, whether it was liability and property, excess insurance recovery, and also workers' comp. Last year, Commissioner Van der Werf asked me for the overall turnover percentage. I remembered it this year, 12 months late. In 2018, the turnover rate for El Paso County was 14.67%. In 2019, as of right now, 11.53%, which is actually a decrease of 3.14%. Okay, I don't need any money. I have no needs.
I think you meant to say you don't need any more money.
I don't need any more money.
Because we can find something to do with the money you got.
I don't. But I wanted to, I really would like to thank Sheriff Bill Elder and Clerk and Recorder Chuck Broerman for their support by providing funding toward 2 additional NeoGov modules. I also need to say thank you to Julie Crow, the Executive Director for DHS, for funding a part-time position to assist with the ongoing recruiting needs, especially in her department. And last but not least, I want to thank my team for their continuous dedication to the county. I brought my NeoGov expert with me, Miss April. When we talk about NeoGov, you know, I know how to use it, I know how to look up things, but we actually came back from a conference to see the NeoGov, and I would like for April to give you a little idea of what NeoGov stands for. Also, I would need to let you know, Boulder County has NeoGov. The city has all 5 modules. Arapahoe County has NeoGov, Douglas County, Adams County, and Pueblo County. And we had 1 module, and starting February, we should have 3. So I would like for April to give you, be available to any questions you may have for NeoGov.
Questions? Kind of late in the day, sorry.
No, it's okay. We're very excited, and I want to reiterate what Andrea said. We're very appreciative to be able to get those additional modules. They're going to be great for the candidates, great for the county as far as branding and attracting that top talent. So we're very, very excited.
Awesome, thank you.
Do you have any questions? Us?
Thank you. Nope, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Citizens Outreach Group, the final presenter of the day.
I'll speak quickly. I'm also joined by Stephanie Adams, our vice chair, so she'll tag me out if needed. But the Citizens Outreach Group, affectionately called the COG, is made up typically of 11 members of the El Paso County area, 5 appointed from your respective districts, with 6 members at large. One of the benefits of that and what makes it such a resource to you, the commissioners, is it gives you a very diverse collective to which the department heads and yourselves as well are able to present several county matters, one to educate us and thus empower us in educating our fellow citizens, but also to be available to questions and clarity on matters so that the public can have a more concise grasp of county's strategic plan, other taxes, and other matters that affect every citizen. We gather roughly once a month, with some exceptions there. We also include activities for volunteer opportunities with the county fair and organizing the Citizens College, again, educational outreach opportunities for the citizens. But at least once a year, we review and assess the progress of the county's strategic plan, the activity of the public safety tax, as well as the progress of the county's 5-year financial roadmap. So at the April meeting of the COG, we actually conducted that on site at the Fountain Creek Nature Center. We were deliberate about incorporating facilities and venues around the county, again, to better be educated on where the money's going. And, oh, thank you. I moved my slide and not your slide.
Yeah, wait.
See? She's worth every penny. And so Tim Wolkin was generous enough with his time to come and present to us the strategic plan overview. He was also very good about taking us through the, however your clicker works. Oh, that's just toggling it on and off. There we go, thank you. This is not an Apple device, apparently. Nonetheless, Tim, like many other department heads and county commissioners, have been very generous with their time, meeting with us and explaining the vision of the county, the various objectives here. And so we reviewed the strategic plan. We found it was very comprehensive, and I know there was deliberate effort on his part to make it so, and they were even awarded acknowledgement because of that. We also appreciated that much of the information that's provided to the COG is readily available to the citizens. And again, very comprehensive, very accessible. Many of us share this through social media and our circles to make it available. So we appreciate the efforts on the county's part to do that. At our June gathering, again, we met on site. We met at the CJC as guests of Sheriff Elder in his house there. And that was very effective, I will say. To tour us through the CJC, understand the struggles he's dealing with, as well as having him so readily available and his staff to take us through the public safety tax and really help us walk through some of the concerns, some of the public misconceptions on it, and again, empower us so that we were then able to go out with very concise talking points to our respective circles, be that social media, be it in our companies, family, friends, you name it. So we really appreciated his time and felt that he made a very good case for it and was able to keep it comprehensive for the lay citizen, if you will. So hopefully we'll see that moving forward with the ballot measure. The county's 5-year financial roadmap, this was presented at our August meeting. Again, this was conducted on site at a venue. We did it at the Department of Public Works, which was very helpful, again, to see the scope of things like a snow hurricane and how we are prepared to handle that, and how that integrates, obviously, into the financial roadmap for things that we can only prepare so much for and the surprises that may come. And then at our October 7th gathering, Nikki Simmons was good enough to be there with us to take us through the 2020 preliminary balanced budget and critical needs and that next 5-year roadmap. Again, they've always been very generous about answering our questions, clarifying things that to you may be your weekly jargon, but are foreign to many, and translating that for us. So we appreciated that. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Spillane? Seeing none, thank you.
All right, well, and again, thank you so much to the commissioners and the department heads who are so generous with their time to support us and allow us to, in turn, support you by informing the public. Thank you. Happy to.
Absolutely. All right, I think that concludes agenda item number 10. Item number 11.
Item number 11, addendum. There's no addendum.
12.
Item 12, executive session. And I forgot we do have 4 requests for an executive session. If I could just go ahead and read them into the record, please.
Denied.
Just kidding. We do not have any requests for an executive session.
We are adjourned.